Hello and welcome to SpyHards Podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, ready to talk some dot dot dot.
Was
Dun,
that a
dun, dun,
pregnant
dun.
pause? Oh, you were doing the music. Thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't know you were doing that, and now everyone is sort of confused.
Yep, that's
Great
fair.
start. Great start. But we are here to celebrate a very big film, a film that basically led to this podcast, a film that we covered 5 years ago. It was the first film we ever covered on the show, and it's turning 30 this year. Cam, what's the film?
We are talking about GoldenEye from 1995, the debut of Pierce Brosnan in the 007 role, and the movie that launched the Ormoff Award in the early days of SpyHards podcast.
Of course, an award that has been forgotten about not long after it was invented, but maybe we'll
Ye-
bring it back.
Yeah, it was like the award for like the most sweaty bad guy who's panicking the whole time.
Yeah, and I'm quite sweaty right now. Maybe I'm the Euromov of this episode.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe. But we can't celebrate it alone. You all know what we think of GoldenEye. You've heard the episode, so I thought, hey, we'll bring in some experts. I called them. They were all busy, so then I got some other fellas to come and join us. And there's a couple of returning faces and one new face joining Spy Hards this week. So in no particular order, jumping onto the show for his second appearance, he's a writer, he's a humorist, and he's not that much of a fan of No Time to Die. It's Dave Schilling. Hello, sir.
Oh no! I kind of liked it. Remember the
Kinda.
episode was
It was
like,
kinda.
he's the one guy who liked it. I did like it.
I was pro. I was pretty pro on that one.
That's
To be
true.
fair, I was trying to save you the online hate more by just sort of going
That's
with that,
fine.
but you're going to take that. You're going to take that heat.
I'm a big boy. I can take the heat.
Okay. Bond couldn't at the end of the film, but you can.
Well, I mean, insults versus missiles. Like one of those you can dodge when you can.
Indeed. And making his I don't know how many times he's been on this show appearance, it's the one and only Calvin Dyson. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. I think this is my third, because I was on previously talking about Goldfinger and then Torn Curtain, the Hitchcock film. And I think that's it. I'm still waiting for my invite to come and talk about Topaz, which I'm holding you guys to
the
that.
list. Your name is next to that movie on the list.
Oh, good. I'm glad, because I keep thinking every time a Hitchcock film comes up, I'm like, if they get to Topaz, then it's not me. I'm going to be fuming. But yes, anyway, lovely to be back. on
Great to
that
have
threat.
you. What a hill to die on as well. I must have Topaz, or we die, or like blood will be shed.
Yeah.
And last but not least, making his first appearance on the show, although we've appeared on his wonderful YouTube channel, it's the one and only Pentex Productions. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi guys, it's great to be here. Yeah, I feel we've kind of been circling each other for a little while, and I mean, what better movie to be joining the podcast for than GoldenEye?
It was like Bond and Xenia in the bathhouse. We're just like grappling, but we're
Don't
not
bring
quite
that
there.
up. I'm not ready to talk about that yet. All right.
Oh, okay.
Let's build
you-
up to the climax.
No more foreplay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay. You all know this film. We haven't got to do the whole introduction. The reason we're doing this episode is because it's celebrating 30 years of GoldenEye. And I think if there is like watershed moments in Bond history, you'd say Goldfinger. You might say The Spy Who Loved Me. You might say the word Kevin McClory. And you might say GoldenEye. I think it's on there. If there's like a Mount Rushmore of moments, I think GoldenEye's on there. Maybe we'll get back to that discussion. But I think before we get into what we think about GoldenEye 30 years later and maybe sort of talking about why it was so influential and so impactful, let's go back to before GoldenEye. Now, I was a wee bairn. I was a wee baby back then, so I can't really jump into this. But we wanted to talk about maybe the in-between era, the post-Dalton, pre-Brosnan, where there was no Bond. And I'm going to throw it out to those in the room who were around, who have an insight into it. What was that like for Bond fans in that sort of period of waiting?
Did you guys like
elders?
James Bond Jr.? What did you think about James Bond Jr.? Great show. That was my first experience with James Bond. I was becoming a budding moviegoer in '89, which is of course the year License to Kill comes out and no one sees it. And not no one. I mean, most people didn't see it, but some did. Just buried at the box office by Batman Indiana Jones. I think Lethal Weapon 2 came out that year, and it was just like nobody's in the mood for a dour kind of James Bond movie. And so the cartoon was like the only thing that you could really interact with. There were some, I think, choose your own adventure novels at the time that you could get, or, ephemera, like real hardcore stuff. But it was the cartoon that was keeping James Bond alive.
Yeah. I discovered Bond through my parents showing me View to a Kill. Interesting intro to the franchise, but when I was probably like 10 years old. And we would go and rent the various Roger Moore and Sean Connery films. But to me, James Bond was something that existed in the past. I was never made aware through my parents that James Bond movies were still being made. So, like, Living Daylights would have been just a few years old, like maybe 2 or 3 years old at that point, and I did see it. But they were never like, they're still making James Bond movies. And I remember going to actually the grocery store and seeing a stand up for License to Kill coming to video, and I had no idea it was a James Bond film. I remember that poster, but even as a kid, I would just look at it and go, I don't know what that is. And it wasn't until later that there was that realization as I kind of got to that young teenage, kind of 12-year-old period where I started reading things like Entertainment Weekly and realizing that like James Bond had been on standstill and that it would be coming back. I didn't really think it was a thing that still existed when I was watching the franchise, I guess in the early 90s. I mean, I was aware of James Bond Jr. I did watch that the odd time for sure, but again, that felt like kind of like okay, well, this is just something referring to an old series of movies.
Well, what about Calvin and Pentex? Any insight into that era at all?
I was a bit more interested in Power Rangers around that time, I think. I was born in 89, so I'm coming to this as sort of someone who became a Bond fan when GoldenEye was already around and established and what have you. So, yeah, I think it was like 97, 98 when I started getting into the series. So the promotional lead up to The World Is Not Enough is the one that I really, that sticks out for me. I suppose when it comes to GoldenEye awareness, or even just an awareness of James Bond in general, I have a hard time remembering if I know that Moonraker and Diamonds Are Forever were the first two Bond films that I saw. I can't remember if I knew of James Bond through the game first and then became aware. I do remember me and my friends being, 8, 9 years old, however old we were, talking about GoldenEye because we loved playing it. And then I was the one being like, there's a film about this. My grandma's got it on video, so, let's watch it kind of thing. So my experience of GoldenEye is coming very much like, a few years after its initial release, and I don't really have much of a perspective on James Bond between 89 and 95, and I hoped that I never would go through such a long spell of James Bond films not being released, and here we are in 2025. But anyway, over to Pentex.
Yeah, well, I kind of had a similar experience to Cam, but I guess 10 years later. So I was born in 92. So again, I also, not to age the podcast here, but it's it's funny. I grew up and we had most of the kind of Roger Moore films, and they'd just been taped off TV. But it was the same sort of thing. I was dimly aware of Pierce Brosnan as Bond, but it wasn't really until I remember, going to the movies to see like the new Lord of the Rings film, and there was a Die Another Day poster, and it kind of clicking and being like, all of a sudden, wait, that's the same as these Roger Moore films that I grew up on that my parents liked. These are all the same. And then I discovered Tomorrow Never Dies, and then GoldenEye around that same sort of time. And so while I was growing up in the 90s, I watched the classic Bonds, but I wasn't really aware that Bond was still being made and that there were new films with this actor, Pierce, until quite late.
I want to go back to the Nana Dyson of it all. Because I love her taste in the films. The fact that she had it on VHS is truly astounding. I love that.
Yeah, it was there on the shelf with Hellraiser and a bunch of Steven Seagal films. She had a real odd taste, did Grandma Barbara. But
Odd/awesome. Good.
Yeah.
I mean,
it depends on the Seagal film, I have to say. Though. I can't say they're all awesome.
Under Siege is great. I have to chime in and say one of the important things about being a Bond fan in America at the time was TBS Turner Broadcasting, the cable channel, would do marathons of all of the classic films. I think Thanksgiving or Christmas, sometime in the holiday period in America. And that was where I started to see a lot of the older films. I got to see Goldfinger. I got to see View to a Kill, all the classic Connery Moore. That was at a time when they would not show On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Like they just didn't show it, or they showed it at like 2 a.m. And I was always like, why do they never show this? And then, becoming a bigger fan, you start to understand why it was considered the black sheep. And now today it's considered the best film. But I remember those days where it was like, this is just, you're going to have to go find the VHS if you want to see it.
I remember On Her Majesty's. I had never seen it, and my friend, it was his first ever Bond film. I was like, you have to watch a James Bond film. They're so exciting. And I went and rented On Her Majesty's and showed it to him, and he was like, what the hell was that? I love it, but
yeah, it's interesting how that one's come around, and that maybe that's well, I will jump off at the TBS point because I guess I can't speak to it myself, but I definitely had seen Bond films before I saw GoldenEye, but it was on ITV and it was on a bank holiday here in the UK. But I don't like I always think of Mark O'Connell, friend of the show, Mark O'Connell, and he has this photographic memory of every Bond film he saw on every bank holiday, and I just don't have that a memory or recall ability. I'm sure I did see some of them because we only had terrestrial television. There's only 4 channels at that point. You probably were going to have it on. But yeah, the one I distinctly remember seeing first, which what we'll get to, would be GoldenEye. So yeah, but I also can say to the ITV and the TBS of it all did keep flying the flag in those years in between, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was
But
even
then
the same in New Zealand. They used to play all the classic films on TV, but I think this was why I'd missed out on Pierce during the 90s. Because those were the new films, I think the New Zealand TV stations didn't really have the rights to those yet. And so every time there was a Bond film on TV, it was always an old one. But I think that tradition of people discovering Bond through them being just aired and re-aired and re-aired on TV, I think that crosses generations, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, because I live in Canada, but we would get those marathons as well from US affiliates. And we would definitely, at that point, I think I'd seen almost all the movies, but I just remember going and rewatching so many of them. And that's how you fall in love with, as Kelvin and Pentex do on their shows. It's the details, all the little details of the Bond films. That's where you really start to pull that stuff out of, is those rewatches.
And it just, I'll take us over to the next subject in a second, but it just strikes me again. I remember talking to Scott Mantz when we did The Spy Who Loved Me, and he was just saying how much it meant to him in America, the Bond films, and how impactful they were on his youth. And I often forget just the cultural imprint that these films have outside of the UK, because again, I'm very Anglo-centric. I live here. But yeah, and Dave, you talking about it on TBS and stuff, and Pentex, in New Zealand. It's interesting just how wide this net is. Probably why we're all here right now. But okay, so that was the void, the gooch in between the films. But so that's a term I use. The gooch.
Oh, it's like a term. It's like a taint.
Yeah,
what a taint is. Right?
Yeah,
kind of like that.
It's the space in between.
It's a classier version of taint.
There you go. It's
a shame to say, Dave, that is where my mind first went, and then you confirmed it for me. So.
You know what? I know all the good slang.
Yeah. We're really classing up the joint here. Thanks, me. But okay, GoldenEye is announced. Now, again, I was sort of out of the loop. I think I see either GoldenEye later or the game comes first, but whatever way that comes for me. But especially more, I'd probably say towards Cam and Dave, but then we'll pick up everyone else afterwards. Do you remember like the announcement happening? Pierce Brosnan signed up. We have a name with a film. We have an actor. It's all beginning to happen. Do you remember that reaction in the fandom? And how did you take the news?
Well, I'll start and say that it must have been 94, right? When they announced and they're like, we're going into production. I was 10. And I wasn't like keeping up with the trades. I wasn't like reading Entertainment Weekly at the time. I would eventually get to that point, but I think that was because of my love of things like Star Trek and James Bond, where it really grew because those franchises were growing during that period of my life, right? Like Next Generation was such a big deal for Star Trek, and Pierce was such a big deal for Bond. So it wasn't until GoldenEye came out that I even cared, right? And then
Mhm.
it comes out, and I don't see it in theaters. I have to see it at home because I think I wasn't. My parents were very judicious about PG-13s at the time, mostly because we saw Batman Returns. And my mom walked out of the theater just horrified that she showed her child that movie. And so PG-13s became handed out a little bit more selectively. But VHS for GoldenEye, and then weirdly, I couldn't see PG-13 movies, but I did have every cable channel in my room, including HBO, Cinemax, Showtime. So I taped GoldenEye off of HBO, and there are parts of that movie that I watched more than others. That's all I'll say. Around 12, 13, 14.
It was Pierce swimming in the sauna scene, right? When he's in his trunks, right? That was the scene you watched.
Fast forward a little bit.
Oh, oh, right. Okay, sorry.
Just like 10 minutes, maybe a little
Ah,
less.
a little less, maybe. What about you, Cam? Were you excited that GoldenEye was happening?
So I wasn't like Dave as aware of the casting of Brosnan. I think I'd heard it and the problem was I would get a lot of my movie news from like the local newspaper, and a lot of that stuff was fake anyway. Like I remember announcements of Kurt Russell taking over the Batman role for Batman Unchained. Like they would actually put that in the newspaper, and you'd be like, "Oh, well, I guess I'll be seeing Batman Unchained pretty soon." No. And so like you would see a story like that about Pierce Brosnan, you'd be like, "Oh, okay, I guess." It was really two things for me that spoke to the complete hype I had for Goldeneye. Number one was the trailer, or the teaser, I should say, with the reveal of Pierce Brosnan shooting out the words to spell 007. That blew my mind when I saw that.
You were expecting someone else?
And they also attached that to a lot of the VHSs that came out around that time as well. And so not only did I see it at the movie theater, and I did actually go to the movies a lot at that age, but also sitting at home and watching, Thunderball over and over again, as I was wont to do, I would see that trailer in front of it every time. And so like it would just build the hype the more times you saw that trailer. And the other thing was Entertainment Weekly put out an issue, and this is maybe like a couple weeks, 3 weeks before GoldenEye's release. And it was, for me, something I never realized I always wanted, which was this dive into the franchise, ranking all the films, naming the best and worst elements of the movies. And I sat and I would read that magazine over and over. I probably read it like 15 times before the movie came out. And so, like, it did both those two things hand in hand did wonders for building up my excitement. And I remember actually watching Siskel and Ebert before I went and saw the movie, and they were very mixed. It was kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down situation, and I was like, oh, okay. And I think like Entertainment Weekly wound up giving it like a B minus or something like that as the review before it came out. And so it kind of like tempered my expectations, but it also that's not the experience I had really watching the movie.
It's kind of crazy how influential those magazines were. You talk about the one you had there. Calvin, in the back of my mind, I recall you holding up an issue of the TV Times in one of your videos at some point.
Yes, I have the honorary Sean Connery cover from 2002 when they did like a run of like different covers up until Die Another Day, and I've kept a hold of it ever since.
I remember rummaging through the shelves of W.H. Smith to find a copy of the Radio Times 30th anniversary of Star Trek edition they did when they were talked about all the shows leading to that point and the films and such. And I still have that. It's in my loft. I treasure that. And but like those things were so important back then. Now, like, can you imagine a magazine causing that sort of a stir for film's publicity? I don't think that could ever happen again.
No way.
But Pentex, Calvin, what were your memories of the GoldenEye build-up? I'm sure you had tons of stories to share. Calvin, why don't you lead us off?
No memories at all. Like, my awareness of Bond was completely non-existent at that point. So I was racking my brain, like thinking about what you said about Mark O'Connell earlier on, like having this like photographic memory of first impressions of like, I know exactly, like I said, I definitely borrowed the VHS from my grandma to watch GoldenEye. I can't remember much about like my initial thoughts or experiences of it like I can so clearly Moonraker and Diamonds Are Forever, but it was one of, if not the Bond film that I was watching the most, like at that time. Like I was, wearing out that VHS and then eventually got my own as part of the collection and what have you. So it was, but the trailer that Cam mentioned, like even though I wasn't around, never saw it on the big screen, anything like that, that is still such an iconic trailer. And I think I think every Bond fan knows which trailer you're talking about when you bring it up because it's that iconic. And I just enjoy watching that on a loop over and over again, even though I've seen the movie many times at this point.
Again, like a teaser trailer like that, something you just don't see much of anymore. Like bringing that sort of level of hype. Maybe like a Marvel film, but even they have sort of disappeared in terms of relevancy.
It's like a 2-minute, 30-second trailer. And when they debut it, it's like there's a 5-second trailer telling you the trailer's about to start.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's not helpful for me at all. I literally chose to click on this. So I know it's coming. You don't have to do that. And then maybe like the day before or 2 days before, they're like, it's coming on Thursday. And there's a little clip. But it's never going to be like that.
And with like the material that was shot, like I know that some movies do include clips in the trailer that aren't necessarily going to be in the final film, and they make you think that it is going to be in the final film. Where I like that whole era of Bond trailers, like Pierce like shooting through the letters and then walking towards the cameras, and you expect something else like that. They filmed that specifically for the trailer, of course, and then I think that kind of thing just makes it all the more special. I think Tomorrow Never Dies is similar, and then the Dine of the Day one, the initial teaser for that is the one that I remember, where it was like you're looking and you think it's like sand dunes at night, and then they all start moving, and then it turns out it's all these like naked women sort of writhing around, and then it's the giant CG ice walther, and then a bullet shoots out. It's I love that era of
I've
trailer.
never seen that. I'm going to go track that down.
What?
I've never
that
seen
was
it.
the one that got me excited in cinemas. That was the one that I was seeing when going to see Lord of the Rings and stuff at the cinema. That was the one that got me excited.
But yeah, something did change, didn't it? Where we moved from that period of you're making a teaser and you're actually filming and writing something specifically just for an advert. It's never going to be in the movie. It knows it's an advert. And I think those sorts of things are great. Like there's the Bond ones, there's other ones as well. And that just kind of went out of fashion sometime around the 2000s. And I don't know why, but it does mean we've got this very narrow window of this Bond media that just exists purely in that world of marketing. And it's great. The fact that there's a 30-year-old teaser trailer is one of the most iconic Bond things. That's so impressive, right? I mean...
Well, on the other side of that, I mean, you're never going to get Daniel Craig doing the Got Milk advert like Roger Moore did on Golden Gun. So
Didn't he do a Heineken ad for like
He did.
Skyfall? I feel like that was the last time he did anything where it's like, I'm pretending I'm being James Bond, but I'm in a commercial for a beer or, some other thing.
He also did like one of the SNL skits in character, I think, towards the end for No Time to Die.
And 2012 Olympics opening ceremony.
Of course.
That's the number one.
Yeah.
That's a big ad for London. That's basically what that was.
It finally put us on the map.
I went to London a couple months ago, and I went to Stratford, and they're lucky the Olympics happened because otherwise it would just be that mall.
It's a really depressing place, Stratford.
One of the
Otherwise,
worst malls I've ever seen in my life.
and it's a Westfield. Like you think it's okay, but it really isn't.
It made me feel like I was back in Los Angeles. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I thought I was in a nation of culture and sophistication, and there's a John Lewis where someone's puking out on the sidewalk.
The authentic Stratford experience. Yeah, not many people say, I went to London and I went to Stratford. It's
Well, the Victoria and Albert Museum is out there, so
Yeah.
that's why.
There's a shred of culture that way.
Just a little
shred.
bit. Just a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah.
I don't I don't want to dive into the stories of Westfield, but I'm sure there are plenty of bad stories about that place. Okay, well that's the setup. GoldenEye has come out. You know, it's the film we're talking about, and I suppose the question I want to sort of start us off talking about the film is, what did GoldenEye mean to all of us? So one at a time, we'll go around to sort of share what it means to us looking back on it. Pentex, I'll start with you, sir. What does GoldenEye mean to your sort of Bond fandom?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it was, as I've said, I grew up watching the classics. They were recorded off VHS, off TV. And then around about the time in the early 2000s, I started, you know, the Ultimate Edition DVDs came out. And my mum bought just the one for The Living Daylights because she was a big Timothy Dalton fan, weirdly enough. Not necessarily a Bond fan.
What a
but
pull! Like what
Timothy
a one
Dalton
to start
fan
with.
specifically.
He's so good in Flash Gordon.
It's funny. She really liked him as an actor and really liked that specific Bond movie for whatever reason. So anyway, but that was the first. It was the Bond Ultimate Edition DVD with the special features and everything. That was my first time delving into the Bond, the behind the scenes, but also seeing it on a proper image, not interrupted by ads. And they had two things. They had the booklet inside that explained a bit about the making of the film and the context of it. But they also had that trailer before the DVD where it's like all 20 Bond films and all new collector sets. Like it's seared in my brain, and it had all these clips. And because Pierce was the Bond of the 90s, that trailer leaned quite heavily into the Pierce films. In the same way now you see compilation videos of Bond, they all have a lot of Daniel Craig films. For those ones, they're very Pierce heavy. And Tomorrow Never Dies was the only Pierce film that we'd had on tape. But anyway, I decided I wanted to save up and buy the Bond films on these DVD sets. And I do that kind of one at a time, you know, put my pocket money aside or whatever. And GoldenEye was the first one I bought because that was the one from those trailers. I was just like, there's the tank, there's him jumping out the window, and it just seemed like I already like Tomorrow Never Dies. I want to get GoldenEye, the one where he's on the cover with the AK-47. That just looked like the coolest one to get. And so it was the first one I kind of bought for myself. And then watching it, it was also kind of like, oh, this is still Bond. It's still got Q. It's still got the gadgets, but it's kind of like grown up in a way. And even though I wasn't, I felt like I was. And it was just seeing all the familiar tropes of Bond that I'd loved about the Roger Moore films, all of a sudden in this amazing modern movie that I'd kind of been able to buy myself. So that was kind of how I came to GoldenEye. And so it's kind of got a weird significance for me in that respect, because it was both for me and for Bond kind of growing up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly left its mark because you're talking about it, and it's the one you reached for first when you had the agency in a sense to make your own decisions to buy your own stuff. That's what you buy. Like that's impactful, even if it was a bit of a punt to see how you thought of it. And obviously it proved to be quite a good choice. Dave, what about you? What was sort of your takeaway from GoldenEye?
I mean, it was, like I said earlier, the movie that really crystallized my fandom because it was becoming a pop culture phenomenon at the time when I was young enough to be fully enraptured by something and to not be cynical about it. And it was such a cool movie. There's something that they never recaptured. I don't know if it's Martin Campbell. I don't know if it's just the kind of like the searching for what it's going to be in the 90s, the Cold War aesthetic. I don't know what it was, but that was the coolest of the four Pierce Brosnan movies, and the coolest he ever was in the role. He aged really in the role, and as the movies went on, it felt more like, okay, this is Octopussy era Roger Moore as James Bond. When you're Pierce Brosnan and Die Another Day, it's just not clicking the same way. But there's a youth and vitality to that movie, and as much as people malign the score for GoldenEye, in hindsight, in retrospect, it does have this kind of sleazy Euro trash sensibility that I kind of love. I don't know how everybody feels about the Eric Serra music, but it's cool in the way that the '90s were cool. There's a reason why they picked him, because they wanted that kind of Luc Besson element to it. I think Bond has always been really good at approximating trends of action movies. You go all the way back to Moonraker. Obviously, the Connery films defined the era of action in the 60s. But then by the 70s, everything has changed. Bond is no longer the trailblazer of the action world. And so Star Wars becomes a thing that they have to kind of live up to at the cinemas, or even before that, a blaxploitation James Bond movie. Wouldn't it be nice if Bond was kind of like John Shaft? And so by those 70s films, it was pastiche. It was a form of imitation at times. And I think that GoldenEye was looked at as, how do we do the professional? How do we do La Femme Nikita? How do we do something that has a bit of pizzazz and zip and sex appeal that was different than the sex appeal of the 70s, the 80s, even the 60s? So GoldenEye was so ideally suited for that era of pop culture. And I think that's why it worked for Bond fans, non-Bond fans, young people, old people. It's the height of Pierce's run, which is rare in the history of Bond. You look at most of the other actors. Connery really comes into his own by Goldfinger. Roger comes into his own with Spy Who Loved Me. I don't know if Dalton ever really clicked as Bond because he didn't have the chance. But Pierce's first movie is his best movie.
I I don't know if I could let that comment sit. I almost feel like I want to challenge it, because I think everyone in the room have a different take on whether that is his best movie or not. But
Well, name me another one. Is World and Not Enough better than GoldenEye?
in terms of film craft, I think I'd give you GoldenEye as his best film. But like in terms of his performances, I don't know. I would. I mean, my personal favorite is actually Tomorrow Never Dies. It's
Wow.
my like go-to Bond film.
I was mildly disappointed by that because that was the first one I saw in theaters. Tomorrow Never Dies. It felt short. I remember. I don't know if it's because I watched so many of them with commercials on TBS, but it's like, wow, it's over. That's it. It didn't have the heft of some of the other classic Bond films where it's like we're going to multiple different locations. It didn't have that same travel log feel to it. It's there's a Vietnam sequence obviously, but so much of it does take place in Europe, and it doesn't have that same kind of like globe spanning thing. But I saw it in theaters. That was when I was fully obsessed. Was Tomorrow Never Dies. I got the soundtrack. I listened to that Moby remix all the time.
Yes.
I don't know if
Yes.
I don't think it's a better movie. I think maybe Roger Spottiswoode was not the ideal director for a movie like that. He was more, I think had done a lot of documentaries and kind of very, very kind of like realistic movies at that point. Had he done action before that? I don't know because I've only seen Tomorrow Never Dies in his filmography. But it just didn't have the same energy that Martin Campbell brought to GoldenEye. Visually, the performances, the villains are so much more memorable in GoldenEye. From Sean Bean, Famke Janssen obviously is one of the great hench people in the Bond franchise now. I would put on a top with Odd Job or with Red Grant or with any of the other great henchmen in the Bond franchise. There are just so many elements of that movie that transcended the moment and are now part of the firmament of the franchise. They're iconic in a way that I think the other three just don't get there.
I could field more responses on like the is it Brosnan's best, but I feel
I'm
like
sorry.
I need to no
Let's
because
save that for later.
that's a whole other episode. I think we could probably come back to that. But I want to go to Calvin because for you, what did GoldenEye mean for your sort of Bond fandom?
It was my experience, I suppose, is very similar to Pentex's in a sense that, like I say, I can very definitely remember Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever. I suspect I must have seen some other Bond films, Roger Moore, Sean Connery ones before coming to GoldenEye. But GoldenEye, obviously, part of this is when you're a kid, the new thing is obviously the best. And so, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, those VHSs got completely worn out for me. I mean, I've always preferred GoldenEye. I mean, to this day, it's my favorite Bond film. So it's as much as I do love Tomorrow Never Dies as well, and The World Is Not Enough for that matter. GoldenEye still sort of sits apart from them. And I think Dave bringing up the Eric Serra score is part of the reason why GoldenEye feels like it has its own kind of identity in a lot of ways in the Bond. I do think of Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, Die Another Day, being of a very similar piece. GoldenEye feels like it's completely, and sometimes it's, other Bond films are similar, I suppose, and it's often if they've got the same director. So Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun, all directed by Guy Hamilton. So they have a similar sort of texture to them. And obviously the Brosnan ones are each directed by somebody else, but still GoldenEye just has, I don't know if it's just a collection of things, like they were just figuring out the whole formula again. So even though you have people coming back for Casino Royale, like Martin Campbell, Phil Mayhew, the cinematographer, there are, some of the returning faces that you expect behind the cameras of a Bond film. It still feels like its own special little snowflake, lightning in a bottle kind of thing. And I think I've always gravitated towards that. Like, I think I promise I won't be going back to the game every single time I'm talking, but just to go back to the game, I think that also helped make GoldenEye feel like a brand of itself within James Bond. Like, I do think that GoldenEye specifically has a life outside of the series. I think a lot of that is to do with the game, and even if it's just the association people have, like people who might have spent hundreds of hours playing the game but seen the movie twice, but they remember loving the movie and it's still in their minds because of playing through the game so much. And that is a part of my experience with the movie as well, because we played GoldenEye so much, like 4-player multiplayer. It was our favorite multiplayer game, me and my friends. And so I think that association for me was very special and important. And this was at a time where, the Super Mario Brothers movie with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo was, one of the only sort of other references I think I had at that time for like, a video game movie. And yet here's GoldenEye, which is this amazing game, this amazing grown-up film. Like, it's a 12 rated film, and there's sex and violence and, certainly pushing the envelope for a Bond film in a lot of ways. So it felt like a grown-up, film. I don't know if we're going to get specifically into talking about the Xenia and Admiral on the bed scene.
We probably have to. I do want to piggyback on what you said, Calvin, about it standing out, because it does stand out, and I think one of the reasons why it stands out is because of the time between License to Kill and GoldenEye. A lot of people came back. A lot of people didn't come back. John Barry doesn't come back for License to Kill, I think, because he had tax problems or something. Like, he had a serious tax problems for many years and couldn't travel to the United States or something. But he's gone by License to Kill. And then who's gonna fill in with the music? Who's going to be the production designer? Who's gonna design the opening credits? I think it was Daniel Kleinman, right? It was the one who designs the credits in that era. There's a lot of changeover. It's a changing of the guard kind of thing, and I think with Cubby also stepping aside slowly but surely by the time we get to Tomorrow Never Dies, I think this is the last one that is Albert R. Broccoli presents Pierce Brosnan as James Bond 007 and GoldenEye. I think it's the last time he's credited in that way. Things are changing in the franchise, and so new people are coming in behind the scenes and in front of the camera. We have a new M, we have a new Moneypenny, we have a new all of these characters are changing, except for Q, of course. So that I think contributes to it because they're figuring it out. right? Barbara and Michael are figuring out how this is going to function in the new era. We have a new actor, we have a new everything. And so by the time they get to Tomorrow Never Dies, there's a system. There's a clarity of this is what it's going to be. We're going to have Bruce write it, and we're going to have it be this way, and this is how this is the thing that we want Pierce to be. But they hadn't figured that out with GoldenEye, so they made some mistakes maybe. Or they made some decisions that maybe we like that they didn't like in retrospect.
Well, it feels like with GoldenEye. Traffic. Well, it feels like with GoldenEye that there was still one foot in the past, in a way where you kind of get this merging of mid-90s film craft with sort of the storytelling sweep of the previous films. Whereas when you get to Tomorrow Never Dies onwards, they're like, we know what these are. These are like streamlined 1990s action films. And that really becomes kind of the model. And then things would, of course, change with Daniel Craig as well. But that's kind of how I felt even at the time. And I guess I'll just give my experience. So my relationship with GoldenEye was a little different in that I was very excited to take my friends to it. We all went. And I have a problem. I don't know if any of you can relate.
I've told you had a problem for a while, actually.
It's true. It's true.
With drinking or what?
Well,
where when I see a new Bond film and it is a new actor in the role, I have a lot of trouble focusing the first movie. I spend a lot of the movie going like, does this feel like Bond? Is this like pulling me out of the movie? Am I feeling the same kind of feelings I had watching Roger Moore, Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, George Lazenby? And so the first time I watched GoldenEye, I enjoyed the movie, but I was a little bit removed in a sense of like trying to like kind of align the movie with the Bond experiences of the past I'd had. And so I guess I was just young enough that it wasn't an age where I would go and see a movie over and over again. And so I saw it the once in the theater and then waited till it got to home video. And then I like hounded my video store to buy a copy, a used copy, because back in those days, you couldn't buy any movie you wanted on VHS. Only certain movies were available, things like Disney films, Batman 89 would have been available, Jurassic Park. But GoldenEye was not one of those. And you would have had to pay about $100 to get a copy. And so you would just hound your video store. Like, can I buy one of the pre-watch copies? And you'd wait until they started narrowing their stock down as demand dropped. And I finally got a copy of GoldenEye. I was very excited, and I got it home. And the top maybe like ninth of the screen was blurry. And so it became the like, oh. And so I didn't really watch GoldenEye that much on VHS. I watched the other ones, which looked a lot better. And so it was like I got on board for the hype of Tomorrow Never Dies. That was the big one in terms of hype, where all my friends who'd played the game were really excited for Tomorrow Never Dies. And we all kind of ran off to that one. We're thrilled, got good copies on VHS and watched those of Tomorrow Never Dies and so on and so forth. GoldenEye became, for me, much more of a grower over time of watching it on DVD, Blu-ray, and really falling in love with it over time and realizing how superior I think it is to the other Brosnan films and to many of the Bond films. GoldenEye, when I saw it back in 1995, I never would have put in a kind of top 5 Bond ranking, but I now would. And so to me, it was the grower, really, of any of the films I watched, because I think when it comes to the Craigs or the other Brosnans, I haven't really changed too much in how I feel about them.
You've really got to stop saying grower.
It feels appropriate for Bond, right?
Oh, yeah, actually, I suppose
he's
it's
both a
spot on.
grower and a shower, which
That's
is
right.
weird. I don't know how he can manage that, but he cycles back and forth.
Cam's got a slide whistle sat around there somewhere. He might have to deploy it at some point.
Yeah.
I suppose then, like, it is sort of weird. Everyone's got this odd, different genesis. I suppose I'm closest to Calvin in that sense of my origin story, my villain origin story with GoldenEye. We had the game first. Simple. N64, I've got 4 brothers, so there was 5 of us, so we would just rotate in and out, taking turns. The person died is eliminated, the other person takes the control. Round and round and round we go.
Slappers only.
That's a very British thing to say, actually. Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, and so that is it. But like people forget that the GoldenEye game came out in 1997. A lot of people seem to forget that. They think it was like a day and date release with the film. It was not. So I was obviously playing that game quite late So I was probably watching it playing the game in the lead up to the release of Tomorrow Never Dies. But what we did do pretty quickly was get a copy of the VHS of GoldenEye before Tomorrow Never Dies came out. And that's where I saw GoldenEye on my home system, and then I saw Tomorrow Never Dies in theaters. I've got firm recollections of leaving the theater for Tomorrow Never Dies, but for GoldenEye, I've only ever seen it in theaters in like re-screenings later on. But for me, the question being, you know, what does GoldenEye mean to my Bond fandom? The thing is, people talk about Goldfinger being the blueprint. Calvin, we've had this discussion about Goldfinger being the blueprint, and sure, it is for a lot of people, but GoldenEye's mine. Like it was the first one I really like absorbed and rewatched and was fascinated by, and would go back and scrub through. And I mean, it was like 1997. I was 10. There were certain scenes that played more than others. I think Dave knows what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's just how that works. And so I became obsessed with it, and then Tomorrow Never Dies came out like a few months later, and so it was just like this Bond experience in our household. You've got the game, and then Tomorrow Never Dies in theaters, and it's a Star Trek household, so like it's a bit blasphemous to have another fandom going on at the same time, but Bond was happening simultaneously, and yeah, I was having the time of my life at 10 years old. It was 1997 was a good year. I haven't had many good years since, but that was a good one.
It's all downhill from there.
So that's sort of the what it means. But I suppose then the next thing I want to look at is digging a little bit deeper into GoldenEye. There's some moments I know some people are quite keen to talk about, specifically one scene everyone seems to want to talk about.
I'll say I'm not keen to talk about it, but I feel like we must.
I'm very nervous.
Okay, all right. Well,
it's like my first time. I'm very nervous.
Well, looking on the film, what do you think is the most successful element of GoldenEye? What is it that really worked about the film? Why do you think it had such an impact? It could be Brosnan, it could be a certain moment. We'll just talk about that for a second. I'll go a different way around. Calvin, let's start with you. What do you think was the most successful element of GoldenEye?
I mean, just to hone in on one, because there's so much about this film that I think works incredibly well. But when I think of GoldenEye, one of the first things that comes to mind is the cast of characters, and how it is a Bond film that completely nails all of the archetypes, you know, just casting how they're written: Bond girl, main villain, henchwoman, you know, all of those parts are just so perfectly formed. And I think it's, you know, it's Famke Janssen being cast as Xenia Onatopp is just such a stroke of luck that we have her in that part, and she brings so much to it. But even right down to, you know, Gottfried John as Orumov, I think is just one of the most underrated like henchman characters. I think he's fantastic with what he does, and on the page it might not, you know, look like that much of a part, but it's just little things that he does. And like when Xenia's just mowed down everyone at Cervanaya, and he just has that look on his face that is so hilarious and just darkly comedic in that moment. But it really is a film, I feel, where the casting is just perfect. There's like no weak link. Judi Dench's M is just, you know, I mean, again, just stroke of genius casting. I know you had Bruce Firestein on the show, of course, and I think he did cite that as being his biggest sort of what he felt was his biggest contribution to GoldenEye, the sort of the decision to make M a woman. And yeah, I mean, stroke of genius. It's just, I feel like it is just something where, like I say, I just think of this collection of characters, and it's just, you know, 8, 9, 10 people that are just so pitch perfect in their parts. There's just absolutely no weak link for me.
It's kind of crazy when you think about like something we were just discussing earlier on about like the changing of the guards with GoldenEye. Casting our mind back to a film we spoke about before, on Her Majesty's. They had a new Bond, but everyone else was basically the same. You had a lot of, and they actually put the heavy hitters in because they were a bit afraid of what this new Bond would be like. And of course, they're bringing like Dame Diana Rigg to act alongside George to make sure he's got someone propped up against him who actually can act. Sorry, George. But this is a different thing. This is a completely new slate in a sense, except for the odd couple of faces. And it's just crazy how successful that is and how confident it feels in itself.
No, totally. Because I think Q is the Oh, like in terms of an actor, returning as the same character, I think he is the only one in it.
In GoldenEye, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
It's just Desmond. Everybody else is different.
Yeah.
Tanner's not in it, right? They don't bring in Bill Tanner until Tomorrow Never Dies.
No, Tanner is in it.
Tanner is
Michael
in it,
but it's a
Kitchen.
different actor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's a different actor.
What?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody comes back. It's the new Moneypenny. Completely different. We don't even get a Felix Leiter, which it's kind of like, why isn't Joe Don Baker's character Felix? It doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But
I should have asked Bruce about that. That is actually something that bugged me when I rewatched it today. Like, why is it not Felix? That feels like a Felix.
also, we've seen Joe Don Baker in the Bond franchise already, very famously as a villain, and now we're bringing him in to play his hick American sidekick. It's just, I don't get it. I don't know why we never got Felix with Pierce, and maybe that was partially due to License to Kill and how important Felix was to that movie, and you're rebooting everything else and trying to keep it in loose continuity and saying, oh, he got mauled by that shark, so we're not going to bring him back.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? I have always kind of assumed that it's because they just didn't want to they didn't want to tie it into, because obviously License to Kill, as you mentioned previously, it was, didn't perform as well as some of the others box office wise. And maybe they were just, you know what, let's just not tie ourselves too closely to that, but also not write it out of the continuity, because I agree, Joe Don, I mean, he's fulfilling that Felix Leiter role. He's Bond's American colleague that he goes to meet out in the field. But I really like Joe Don Baker in this, and The Living Daylights is not a film that I go back to all that much. Sorry, Pentex's mum, but
I also like that movie a lot. I think it's it's probably in the top 10, top 15.
I would go to bat for Living Daylights over License to Kill any day of the week.
Every single day.
Yeah, I'm on the same. I'm a big Living Daylights fan as well. But I think John Doe Baker is a talented enough actor, and Wade is such a caricature that they feel very distinct as people. Like you can tell it's the same actor, but he's not doing the same thing, and I think that helps sell it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know if it's the proximity to License to Kill and just being like, look, we're reinventing and rebooting everything else. Let's not bring Felix in as well. Why don't we try something new? And instead of having, Felix is never a character the audience has ever particularly warmed to in the way that they warmed to Moneypenny or to Q or anyone else. So maybe that was something they were like, you know what, that's not necessarily an essential Bond ingredient. Why don't we try mix it up with a slightly more comedic character in the form of Wade? And they stuck with it at least a little bit. And that scene where they meet only works if they don't know each other. And I know that's reverse engineering it, but it's kind of like, do we have him meet Felix, an old contact who he's already friends with, or do we try to get a bit of comedy and levity, but also establish some of Bond's character in that opening scene, particularly because Zukovsky is the person from Bond's past that he's meeting. So it's like, right, I'm going to Felix, who's in my past, to meet Zukovsky, who's in my past. Like, I can see it being cleaner from a screenwriting point of view to have that character be a new friend.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, well, the thing that always bugged me about Jack Wade was that they didn't really commit to that character. Where I thought, well, you've got Joe Don Baker, and I remember I was probably the only, teenager in the audience watching The World Is Not Enough, going, "Come on, where's Jack Wade?
Why is that not Jack Wade? Why is Michael Madsen in this movie?"
Yeah. And then we get to the fourth one, and it's like, wait, I got no Jack Wade or Zukovsky. Like, this is not right, people.
Well, Pentex, you were just talking, but why don't you give us your take? What do you think was the sort of most successful element for you for GoldenEye?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, there's so much, and I mean, Dave, you talked about the kind of freshness and the energy that it felt, and just, I think you made that really good point about how, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, so many people were kind of coming to this for the first time, and it kind of like with Casino Royale as well, they had something to prove, and I think you can sense that in the movie. Every single person, be it, in the cast that Calvin's talked about, all the people behind it, Barbara and Michael, they all have something to prove. They have to prove that they can do this. They have to prove that Bond can survive the departure of Cubby Broccoli, which was everyone knew was coming. They had to prove that Bond could survive in the post-Cold War world. They had to prove that Bond could survive another change of actor. Like there was so much at stake in this movie, and I think that just made everyone just go all in and throw everything they had at it. And then in a way, when they had to follow it up so quickly with Tomorrow Never Dies, they lost some of that, because all of a sudden, they were like, right, we've got something that works, let's just do it again. And there was less of that kind of freshness. But for me, my favorite thing about GoldenEye, if I had to pick one, is just Martin Campbell's direction. He is just such a good and very kind of efficient director, particularly of action, but even of dialogue. Like, watch the movie and count the number of things that happen in each shot. Like, he doesn't, if he doesn't have to cut, he won't. He tells whole scenes in single shots or with just a couple of changes. It's very kind of Spielberg almost in a way. And I think it's a really understated skill that he has as a director. And I think that's one of the things that makes both GoldenEye and Casino Royale feel as energetic as they do, is because he deploys all these little cinematic tricks that you don't really notice the first time, but subconsciously they're just telling the story in this efficient way. And he even has that approach in the edit as well. Like there's the deleted scene at the start of the movie where Bond sneaks into the guardhouse and he takes out the wire so that the gate opens, so that he runs onto the dam. And Martin Campbell's like, just start with the gate opening. Like, why? We don't need all of that. And there's so many moments in the film like that. Like, he gets out, he looks at the tank, and then the next shot is that one of it smashing through the wall. They filmed a scene of Pierce running to the tank, getting in the tank, turning it on, driving it out. And it's like, we don't need that. The audience is smart enough to connect it. And I don't mean to knock another franchise, but I was rewatching the latest Mission Impossible movie recently for a video I'm working on. And it's kind of that's a long movie, and it's astonishing how much that sort of thing happens in the movie. And it was funny watching that next to GoldenEye, because in that movie, Ethan Hunt gets captured, and then they take him to the car, and then the car drives up to the plane, and then the plane is flying along, and then we have a dialogue scene in the plane. Martin Campbell just gets rid of all of that, and it makes for this really energetic, fast-paced movie that just constantly keeps moving along. And every time you watch it, you just notice that more and more and appreciate it so much.
Well, I think part of that is because he trusts the audience knows James Bond. Mm-hmm. The moment you describe in this film, where he looks at the tank and then you cut to him driving through the wall, the audience sees him look at it and they're like, oh, we know, because we've seen, 15 of these or however many there were at that point. We know that this is kind of his thing, right? Like in the Mission Impossible movies, they don't give the audience enough credit that they know Ethan Hunt is going to do X, Y, and Z thing, right? He's going to do some crazy stunt or something, because they take it all so seriously. And there is a playfulness to the Bond films that is required because we've done it a million times. And if you want to get the audience to be involved, you have to let them connect the dots and have the moment where they're like, I know this guy. I know him, and he's going to do something crazy, and then he does. You don't need to see him steal the tank. He's got that glint in his eye, and he's got this notion. And you know that he can operate a tank because he's James Bond. So let's just give me the thing that I want. So I think that's a really good point, that Martin Campbell did have this way of understanding the character, but also the audience's relationship to the character. And that's why he was so important for Casino Royale, because he understands that we know so much about the kind of person James Bond is. And part of the joy is seeing our old friend and knowing that he's going to get up to no good. And the best Bond movies use that thing that could be a massive detriment to a lesser filmmaker and say, this is a strength. This character's connection to the audience is the reason why he has endured for decades.
Yeah, and it's something so clever that GoldenEye does in the script as well. This is kind of a reboot. They're reintroducing a new Bond, but they very intentionally make Bond a very well-established agent. And what that means is you can have all of the other characters in the movie, like the audience, they already know who Bond is. 006 knows Bond, his speech about all the martinis, and M calls him a dinosaur, and Moneypenny has that. So all the people in the movie, even Zukovsky, like, they already know who Bond is because the audience knows who Bond is. So let's not pretend that this is a new character to any of us. And yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Martin Campbell knows what the audience knows about Bond and works that into the movie
Yeah.
in a way that makes it really fun.
And then the opposite happens in Casino Royale. Everybody in the audience knows James Bond, and nobody in the movie knows who he is. And so it's almost like a horror movie where you know that the monster is behind the lead actor and is going to stab them in the head with a knife. We know James Bond is going to have sex with that woman. We know that James Bond is going to win that poker game. We know that he's going to get the car. He's going to do all the things nobody else does. And so we're delighting in the fact that we're seeing him do it for the first time and people are discovering this person.
Dave Schilling, ladies and gentlemen, just laid it out there.
I mean, it was a team effort.
Well, I guess that sort of segues into your thoughts then, because what do you think is the strength of GoldenEye, and why is it Xenia on the top's thighs?
The strengths have changed as I've grown up. At the beginning it was definitely that, but I don't know. It's hard. I think similarly to you, I feel like it is the blueprint for a modern James Bond. Mm-hmm. When you think about what they had to do with Casino Royale and the Craig movies, there's a reason why they went back to Martin Campbell. There's a reason why it is a certain way. It's because that movie is so good at laying the groundwork for what James Bond is going to be in the 21st century. Even though this is, late 90s or mid 90s, Pierce is the first Bond of the 21st century. We have a female M. We have all of these references to political correctness, which we now call wokeness. It's the same thing. We've been talking about this for 30 years now, this idea that equality matters, that gender parity matters, that you can't go around sexually harassing people. Throw Bond into that world, what does it look like? They've been asking that question over and over again. I don't know why we can't just be like, he should just be James Bond. What if he's just James Bond? And that's what this movie says. It says he's James Bond still. Yes, the world has changed, but he's still James Bond. And there's a comfort to that. He doesn't have to change. He never should change. He should always be James Bond. There's some things he shouldn't do in a film just to not, perturb the audience. Like, you think about the moment in Goldfinger where he slaps the girl on the ass and is like, "Where is man talk? Go away!" Like, we're not going to do that anymore, right? But he's still James Bond. He still drinks martinis. He's still a Lothario. He still has the nice car. He's still English. He's all of these things, right? And so I think the biggest strength is just in total the ability for this movie to adhere to the code of what the character is while also modernizing it in a very specific way where everything else is different, but he's the same. He's the center of gravity of the movie. But the thing that I think I'm always going to appreciate the most is Pierce Brosnan's performance. And I know there are people who will go to bat for his work in the subsequent movies, mostly because he gets to have one or two monologues or dialogue scenes where he's having an emotional moment, where he gets to be sad in a chair. Like, he's in the cuck chair in the hotel thinking about Terry Hatcher and Tomorrow Never Dies, or, he's conflicted in The World Is Not Enough because the girl that he was falling in love with is actually the villain and she's actually shipping the bad guy, and all of these things that you could tell Pierce was adding to the movies because he's asking for it. Like, can I have some things to play with, some actual drama? I don't want to just be a cartoon. In that first movie, in GoldenEye, he finds, I think, the most subtle way of portraying Bond as both incredibly amusing and unflappable and hard and tough and cold. And I know we're building up to talking about the sauna sequence, but the sauna sequence is that moment where he's both a sexual being, which James Bond has to be. He has to be seductive and erotic and sexual, but he's also hard and he's tough. And I don't mean hard in the sexual way. I mean he's there's the Connery version of Bond, right? Where he's more of a serious figure, at least in those first few movies. And then there's the Moore version where he's essentially a romantic comedy lead and he's just having a good time. And I think as the movies went on, you saw Pierce trying to be more of like Dalton almost, where he's not enjoying himself so much in certain moments, but he's enjoying himself too much in other moments. This is his best performance because he is enjoying himself the right amount and he takes the situation seriously. And when he is having this weird sex fight with Onatop, he's both enjoying it, but also he's fighting for his life. And when he's like, he pulls the gun out and he says, "No more foreplay," he feels like he might shoot her. He might shoot this woman in the face. And Bond always has to seem like a credible, violent person. It doesn't work if he's just having a good time anymore. And I think I love the Moore movies. Spy Who Loved Me is probably the one I watch the most. I will watch it at least once a year. It's the most fun. It's just a great travelogue, romp, adventure, and he has great chemistry with the Bond girl in that movie. And it's great. It's a great song. Everything's wonderful about it. But you don't ever feel like he's dangerous. He's a superhero. He's a British superhero, and that's okay. And those movies are great. But you can't vacillate between the two so much. I think sometimes in Tomorrow Never Dies, there are moments where it's like he's being way too flippant. When he's piloting the BMW with his cell phone, and he's like,
Oh.
I'm having the best time of my life," and it's just like he's playing a video game now, and nothing feels real. It's a fun sequence from a technical standpoint, and it was novel, the idea that you could pilot a car with a cell phone, but it's weightless. But there are moments in GoldenEye that are really hard, and he's selling the brutality of it and the violence of it in a way that I think he never was able to do again. He's either playing the superhero or he's playing a tragic Shakespearean hero, and he doesn't feel like an assassin anymore. And I think that's why the Craig movies pop so much, is because they saw what was missing from Pierce's movies. And I love all four of them, even though I prefer GoldenEye. But you look at all four of those movies, and it's just like, he's not dangerous anymore. But he was still dangerous in GoldenEye.
There's also a dynamism to his relationships in GoldenEye that doesn't exist in a lot of the other ones. Because you look at the villain, the relationship he has with 006, and what that brings out of him as a character. The relationship with Natalia, which gets quite sensitive at times, has more of like a sweeping romance to it. You have Xenia, a character that tests him in a way we haven't seen since, characters like Fiona Volpe, and takes it that extra level. And then also we get the first scenes of him with this new M and the gender dynamic at play and the power dynamic. So it's like if you go across the line, Brosnan always said he wanted more to do in future
Yeah,
films, but
he
he
had so
actually
much to do.
he had so much to do in terms of just having real depth to all of the relationships in Goldeneye. And you can look at films to come and say, well, there's a lot of, him and Elektra together. But what about him and Christmas Jones? What about him and some of the other like Renard? No, that's not there. It's really like they hone in on one or two things versus this movie. It's kind of like spreading the wealth.
I
He
think
was
I think you're right.
he wanted his own on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He
Yeah,
wanted to, that's it.
yeah. I had the exact same thought process you did there, Cam, actually, about like he had a lot to do in this film. But one thing my brain went to was a lot of those relationships are led by the other character. Like M is leading the charge on the sexist, misogynist dinosaur. Natalia is having that conversation with him on the beach about how it won't really ever work. 006 is tearing him a new one, saying about all the girls that he's lost along the way. It's not Pierce Brosnan getting to emote and act. It's everyone else acting at Bond.
Or him being put in a position of having to react. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe
think
that's what Brosnan wanted. I don't know.
I think that is one of the nice, like, because I think Brosnan himself cites the scene on the beach talking to Natalia as his favorite scene in the film, which, being an actor, I suppose he would, because it's the one where that it is quite a lovely scene. It's, you know, when I was a kid watching the film, it was like, oh, fast forward this bit. But now I do really enjoy watching it and the subtlety that Brosnan brings to that, because I do think we are used to him in some of the later films where his performance goes into slightly strange territory. I think, you know, the bit in The World Is Not Enough where he's confronting Electra and he talks about his shoulder knew exactly where to hurt me, and he has all these like strange sort of line inflections and whatnot.
He's Irish. That's his
soapy.
problem. He's just Irish.
If you can't feel alive.
If you can't feel alive. And yet I don't feel like there is much of that in GoldenEye, whether it's a case of him just as an actor not feeling like he's confident enough yet to go to that sort of a bigger dramatic place, whether it was Martin Campbell sort of restraining some of those Brosnanisms. Again, like if you've seen him presenting that Robin Hood documentary, if everyone remembers that from the 90s, where he's talking to camera, doing the whole, and he's really like going for it. And it's like, oh, okay, if that's his natural instinct, maybe he is being sort of reined in by Martin Campbell. And I'm inclined to believe that that's the case, particularly, you know, comparing to Daniel Craig in Casino Royale, which is, again, I think, a very contained Bond performance in a lot of ways, particularly compared with what came after.
You mentioned the shoulder thing, and he's given a gimmick in all three of the subsequent movies. In Tomorrow Never Dies, it just so happens that he used to date the wife or girlfriend, I forget, of the villain. Mm-hmm. In World Is Not Enough, he separated his shoulder. Mm-hmm. So now he's in pain, but they never play that really. Like, he gets over it pretty fast. And then in Die Another Day, he's captured. And so he's playing trauma for 10 minutes, and then he gets a shave and he's fine. So he asked for these gimmicks that never actually affect the story. And I think everything that Cam, I think you mentioned this, of like, there's a totality to everything, and it affects the story. All of these elements that are dramatic elements have a basis within the story and the character of James Bond.
Well, Cam, you're leaving us high and dry. What's your pick for the GoldenEye highlight?
I mean, I'm kind of where Pentex is with just Martin Campbell's direction. Mm-hmm. And a part of that actually that ties into it is, like, they say, I think it was J.J. Abrams, and I'm sure other directors have said this as well, but if you cast well, your job is easy. And the cast of this movie is just a murderer's row. And it seems like there's a confidence that comes with that. We've cast all these roles perfectly. We're good to go. So Martin Campbell's able to focus on moments by moments. And that's something a lot of Bond films do. They're like, we want to be efficient action movies. We want to kind of barrel through things. Whereas I feel like this movie, you know, Calvin, you're putting together these, and Pentex as well, putting out these moments where you have to putting out these montages of Bond moments. And it must be so easy with a movie like GoldenEye, because there's so many moments to pull from that the audience instantly goes, I know that moment right off the top of my head. And it just feels like there's so much attention to detail. When I was talking to Bruce Firestein, we talked about the moment where there is the bullet ricochet right next to Bond's head. He just slightly tilts his head when he's setting a mine. That is just a minor moment that they paid that extra attention to detail. And those are throughout GoldenEye. So you can look at all the elements. They're all in place. You'd expect they would be with a Bond film. But it's the attention to detail. And it's why I've always been a little bit perplexed by Martin Campbell, because I look at the work he does here and in Casino Royale, and I go, this is one of the best filmmakers we have out there. And then I watch movies like Vertical Limit or Edge of Darkness or Green Lantern, and I go, why is he so unbelievably incredible when he makes a Bond film, but doesn't seem to be able to have that kind of confidence in other projects? I don't know, but it all just kind of comes together here.
You could have said the same thing about Guy Hamilton.
Yeah,
some people really just click with James Bond as an aesthetic, as a character, and some people can do both. Sam Mendes obviously could do Skyfall and then also be the guy who did American Beauty and various other things. Some people are just like born to be Bond directors.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people like Martin Campbell. You know, if you're growing up and you're into film, chances are you're into Bond as well. And so I think for people, and Pierce has kind of talked about this as well, but it's like, if you come to Bond after 30, 40 years of watching Bond movies, you've just kind of got all these ideas, I think, just ruminating in your head. You're like, oh, one day if I got to do this, what would I do? And you've just kind of been sitting on that for a while. And I think when someone gets the opportunity to do a Bond film, they're suddenly like, oh, cool, I finally get to do that. And I think that's one of the things that sets Bond apart from another franchise is these have been around for people's entire lives at this point. And people have been able to kind of absorb what works and what doesn't, what they like, what they don't about these films, even long before the prospect of them actually working on one ever turns up. And I think that helps.
I don't think there's any movie franchise, any character where there is a laundry list of things that you have to do. You have to do this. When Casino Royale didn't have a gun barrel sequence, or then the next one doesn't have it until the end or whatever, like people were kind of annoyed or waiting for it to happen, waiting for the theme song, waiting for the moment where Q is going to finally be part of it. Like there's so many things that you have to have in a Bond film, and that could be limiting to some people, or that could be like, oh, I can't wait to do my version of the pre-credit sequence. I can't wait to do my version of the Q scene where they're in the lab. I can't wait to do the what is the villain's lair going to look like? Like all of those things are not detriments to someone who loves these movies. It's like, oh, I get to play with all of these toys and be inside the sandbox and not have to leave. So that's Star Trek. There's not things you have to have in a Star Trek movie. You can watch the J.J. Abrams movies and know you don't have to have anything other than the Enterprise, Jurassic Park, Batman, Indiana Jones. You have this latitude, but there's no latitude with James Bond. It is if you haven't seen Goldfinger, then you don't understand how this movie is supposed to be, because it's supposed to be just like that.
It's interesting trying to synthesize this and also give my thoughts, because everything I was going to point out has basically been said. I was going to highlight Pierce Brosnan, but I think his work speaks for itself. Like, this is, for me, still the gold standard of a Bond film and a gold standard of a Bond. I always measure other Bonds by Pierce Brosnan. Other people do it by other actors. That's just how it works. Probably something to do with whoever is your first Bond. It's interesting seeing it as a kid, and you don't really think about like what led into his performance. Looking at it as an adult who has seen all the films, you go, oh, he's a little bit of Sean, he's a little bit of Roger, and maybe a sprinkling of Timothy Dalton, a tiny bit, and so it's a lovely like transporter incident of bringing all these things together into one person. If I want to add more Star Trek to the mix, and you don't think about that as a kid, but as an adult, it's interesting how Pierce chose to do this, because there are a few people I would say were born for the role. I think Sean Connery was born to play Bond. I don't know about the rest,
David
but I think
Niven, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, how could I forget? But I think Pierce Brosnan was born for the role of the Bond of the Millennium, as he's come to be known as. The modern Bond, I think, is and will forever be Pierce Brosnan. The other thing I was going to bring up is just how much work went into the ladies of this film. We have sort of briefly touched on them all, but when I was going back and rewatching it today, it did sort of stand out to me that like all the ladies just get more to do. You know, the henchwoman is a henchwoman is a woman. You know, you've got Xenia Onatopp. There's not been many of those. There's been mostly henchmen. The Bond girl has her own story, her own agency throughout the film. She's actually going out for revenge herself in many ways, kind of like Kara in Living Daylights, but it actually stays out throughout the film instead of disappearing halfway through. You've got M, who, you know, you've changed one of the biggest people in James Bond's life to being a woman, and it's not played for laughs. It's also not too over the top where it's like just browbeating Bond down. She says the sexist, misogynist dinosaur thing, but she says, like, I still want you to come home at the end of the day. You know, like, I don't want you to die.
It's also not like one scene.
No. And then and then Moneypenny as well, which is, I think Samantha Bond is actually really underrated as a Moneypenny. I know everyone goes back to sort of the OGs, but like, she's not fawning. She's actually just having a sparring match with Bond. Like, the banter is back and forth instead of it being more like, oh, I love you, Moneypenny, blah blah blah, and then disappear out of the room. Whereas she's like, she's got barbs. She's actually sparring with Bond, and I think I'm not trying to come up as this sort of like, oh, Bond films are all about the women. That's not what I'm saying, but I just think it's interesting. One of the things I think that probably works and people don't notice is the fact that everything around Bond has been lifted up, as well as having a good actor, a strong actor in the role. It's just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah,
and
if
I
you
think
have to
coming
have
back
all
to
the elements. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead, Benedict.
as coming back to Dave's point about, the world has changed, but Bond hasn't, and I think you really do see that, particularly in the Moneypenny scene, which incidentally, that's all one shot. Pay attention next time. The whole scene's one shot, and it's just everything about that is fresh. It's still the Bond and Moneypenny flirting banter scene, but it's not, Bond towering over her desk while she kind of bats her eyelids at him, which even still kind of happened with the Timothy Dalton thing. Like the dynamic is completely different, and yet it's still a Bond and Moneypenny scene. And on that point you just made, Scott, like for Natalia, like a decent chunk of this film, and I think pretty much the first time this has happened in a Bond film is told from her point of view. And I know that it's scene where we get introduced to her eventually, Bond is kind of watching live on satellite, so it kind of ties back to Bond, but there's a good 15 minutes or so of this film that doesn't have anything to do with Bond at all. It's entirely about the Bond girl, her story and her arc. And then, as you mentioned, we come back to her. She's going to the computer lab. She's tracking down Boris. She's doing her own thing. And there's a world in which this film doesn't have Bond, and it's just her story. And it kind of plays out in a very similar sort of way. And we've never really seen that in a Bond film. I think, like, from Russia with Love, we get the briefing scene with Rosa Klebb and so on, and that's kind of told from the Bond girl's point of view. But again, it's about Bond, and that's something so different that GoldenEye does that no other Bond film had really done, is be like, you know what, we're gonna pay attention to someone who's not Bond for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, even Triple X in Spy Who Loved Me, she's mad at Bond because he killed her husband. And so it's still about him. And even though she's one of the first Bond girls who's like actually a field agent who can hold her own, she's still obviously subordinate to him, and she doesn't really have a character arc. It's not quite the same. Maybe For Your Eyes Only has some scenes where he's not really centered, but even that, it's not nearly as powerful as it is in GoldenEye.
And it's quite a bold decision as well for them to have made for a first outing for one of the actors as well, to like have the courage to not be with him for a good like 10, maybe even pushing 15 minutes worth of screen time. It's that whole chunk like where he's at MI6 and we're seeing everything that's happening in Severnaya and, with Natalia, Boris, Xenia and Oromov coming in. Like it's a big chunk of screen time, and Brosnan isn't on it for a long time. I suppose that probably, I'm sure there was some restructuring work going on, because in the Roger Moore era, the whole Cervanaya disaster thing would have happened immediately after the opening titles. Like that's when you have the disaster scene, and instead we have Pierce in Monaco and all that. And I guess that is to give him some more space there to establish himself as Bond before we do get into her story. But I think it's a genius move.
Now, I was going to take us over to maybe the downsides or the things that perhaps didn't work, but there's been a lot of tension in this room, and it feels like everyone wants to talk about a certain bathhouse scene. So I think let's just take a break and just talk about it. Like, what is Dave? You sort of let us off. What is it about the bathhouse scene you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of talked about why I like the scene as an adult man. I think everybody knows why I liked it as a 12-year-old. So we don't have to go back into that. Everybody's seen the movie. They know that it's an incredibly sexy scene. And the idea of a Bond henchwoman who can murder you through sex and gets off on killing you in that act is a masterstroke. No pun intended, of the franchise. Because you're weaponizing the thing that James Bond has used to his advantage and his pleasure for the entire franchise. It's kind of brilliant. It would be like if, he couldn't have a martini, or he couldn't, smoke a cigarette or something, because it would, well, I guess those would kill him too, just in a longer period of time. In the era post AIDS and the kind of fear that went with that, to have sex be the way that you die is really fascinating, and it's so much more interesting to play with it that way, to play with that new paradigm that way, than how Living Daylights approached it, which is James Bond will not have sex in this movie. He might, he might, you might think he might, he crash lands into the yacht, and he's too busy to talk to the women because he's, debriefing or something on the phone. But then he's like, well, I guess, I don't, okay. And then we go to the credits. But for the rest of the movie, he's really just like, it's just like a tender romance between these two, and you don't get that sexual titillation that you would in the previous Bond films. So the way that they did that here is sex is actually something that can kill you for real, like straight away. She's gonna choke you out with her thighs, and it's just such a brilliant way of doing it. And I think, I do want to give a lot of credit to Grace Jones as Mayday, which was for real the most like potent female hinge person in the franchise to that point. A physical match, if not superior physically to an aging Roger Moore in A View to a Kill. Uh, and they had sex and all of that stuff, but it was never like she could overpower him. She obviously could if she wanted to, but Bond had to be a match for her. Here, Onatopp is almost physically superior to Bond in a lot of ways, and using his one of his favorite things against him. And so I think that's why that scene works so well, is because it gets to the core of the character, and it plays with the character's interests and the character's history in a way where, like, when she kills that admiral and she has an orgasm, essentially you're like, wait, wait till James Bond has to cross paths with her. But even before then, in the scene where they're playing baccarat, she's not really interested in him very much. She's kind of like, oh, who's this guy? Ooh, I'm not interested in you sexually. And that's immediately, like, we go from the callow sort of young woman who's doing the evaluation, and she's just like over the moon with the fact that she's in an Aston Martin driving around, Monte Carlo or Monaco or wherever they are. I forget where it is. To, I'm not interested in you. I'm good. I'm here to play cards and smoke my cigarillo, and then I'm gonna go kill this guy. Like, she's just not having it, and that scene, that character, that concept is maybe the freshest thing besides a female M in the whole franchise. And it's just so clever and so smart to do that, to use sex as a weapon for James Bond to have to deal with.
Well, you've got all these dark mirrors in this movie because you have him and 006, obviously, but then you also have, in terms of his sexuality, Xenia on a top. And so it's kind of like Bond facing off against these elements of himself throughout the film. And that's something they always would talk about wanting to do. We need to have a character that really represents Bond's mirror, but they did it really, really well here.
Well, a fall from grace, a downside. Is there anything we can critique about this film? There has to be something we can dig down into. And I will challenge everyone in the room to not mention Eric Serra's score as your downside. If we can make it through all five of us without saying it,
it's good. Actually, it's good.
Okay, Dave's on the side of Eric Serra. Great. Okay, let's start with you, Ashley Cam. Let's go the other way around on my screen. What's your pick for the downside of GoldenEye?
I think for me, there's very few that really jump out, but there is one moment that has always driven me nuts. I mentioned it in our original review. This goes back forever. It is a really bad moment of ADR with Jack Wade talking to Bond as they're driving on the way to see Zukovsky. And they're basically explaining, well, how are you going to appeal to Zukovsky? And it goes on. And it's so clearly a patch-in for the audience not understanding what might be going on. And even as a kid, I was like, why does this scene feel so awkward? And I didn't really know the logic as to why it felt weird. But now I just watch it and I'm like, you didn't need this. This was like the rare moment where I felt like the confidence in the movie kind of falters for a second.
I can tell you've watched it so much. Go on, mate.
So I was going to say, it's funny you say that, because there were in fact two deleted scenes. One of a longer conversation between Wade and Bond in the car, and then a scene introducing Zukovsky independently of Bond. It was about 5 minutes that they cut, and then they're like, oh, we need to quickly write some ADR that we can put over an establishing shot of St. Petersburg to fill in what those two scenes did. So yeah, you're very right. That's exactly what happened. And it does stick out like that. Yeah. Sorry,
that is the most nitpickiest pick you could come up with, Cam. I like it, though. I think we're getting into the weeds to find a critique, but I'll throw it to Pentex because you responded to Cam. What's your pick?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to pick a bad side of GoldenEye, but I guess there's a few plot contrivances where if this movie was released today, people would kind of rip them to shreds in the way they did with Skyfall. And it's like any Bond movie is going to have silly plot contrivances and things that don't quite make sense if you think about them for too long, but you just kind of go with it and you don't notice it. And I think because this movie is so well loved and it's kind of predates the internet effectively, and that whole kind of genre of film criticism, people just kind of overlook them. But there's there's a couple of little ones like, why do they tranquilize Bond before putting him in the helicopter only to kill him? Yeah, things like that. But the main one is the theft of the helicopter. And they never really explain. She kills the Admiral, but then she's on the boat with someone who looks like the Admiral. And it's like, is this like a Thunderball body double situation? Is that like, it's never actually clear what her plan was and why she kills the Admiral. And who the second pilot is. Is it Oromov? Is it the disguised Admiral? Because it's not obvious, but in the shot when she arrives on the boat, you can see the Admiral from behind. It's the same. It's if it's not the same actor, it's someone who looks exactly like him. At the same time, Bond is finding his body falling out of the wardrobe, and that's always just kind of been a bit of a confusion for me as to how that plot actually works. But again, the scene moves so quickly, and you've got Bond chasing after the chopper and everything, and it's fine. But it's a sort of it kind of reminds me of how people pick apart Silver's plan in Skyfall, and it's kind of like, it doesn't matter. It's a James Bond movie. Like,
she killed the Admiral because she was horny.
I don't know why she kills the Admiral. I don't know what. I don't know how. I don't know what role he plays. Who the second person is when she gets on the boat. Like, I always thought she was just like using his ID, but he's on the boat. There's someone who looks like the Admiral, and when she kills the Admiral, there's a shot of a hand that's not Xenia's taking his ID out of his wallet. And the only thing I can think of is that there must be a Thunderball style body double so that they can get Xenia and the second pilot onto the boat. But anyway,
I have this exact same. Oh, sorry. I have this exact same thing about the plot because I assume that they are going for like a Thunderball body double kind of thing. Because the guy the camera's like over shoulder. It's clearly the same actor. He's using the Admiral's ID that was taken out, so he must have a likeness. But then he kind of, whoever that is, whether it is, because the next time you see that character and Xenia take off in the helicopter, the next time they're getting out of the helicopter, they've changed costumes and stuff, so it's implied that there has been a pit stop, but it's Xenia and Oromov. So I've seen people theorizing, is it Oromov with a prosthetic, something on to impersonate the Admiral? But there's nothing in the film that would have seen, people assume it's Trevelyan who comes out and does it. But again, there's nothing in the film to actually confirm that. And then I was getting really like micro fixated on later on in the film when there is the sauna scene between Bond and Xenia and they're fighting. There's a random guy that appears and sort of in the middle of their fight, and Bond like picks up, I think it's one of the buckets that you put the water in, and he flings the bucket at the guy and he knocks it back. You don't get a good look at him, but he's got this beard and sort of the frame of the body and stuff, and he looks kind of similar to the Admiral. And I'm like, oh, was he the double and he was like, there with Xenia or something? And then Bond, but then someone corrected me, I think it might have been Mark O'Connell, that, oh no, it's played by a different actor, it wasn't presumably the intention. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll let it go. But yeah,
they're just henchmen sometimes. I saw Batman 89 recently, and in the third act, you have to ask yourself, where did all of these henchmen come from?
At the
That
top of the
Batman has to
tower.
beat up in the cathedral. Were they waiting there? Did they get a text message or their beeper
Yeah.
went off? Oh, Batman's in the cathedral. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But the movie just keeps going, and you're like, I don't care. I just want to know how it ends. This is fun. I think that's
Exactly.
really it. Like, Bond needed somebody to knock out, and
I
let's get a guy in here
I like to think
Yeah.
it was Ricky Jay, and that was his first appearance in the Bond franchise before returning gloriously for Tomorrow Never Dies.
triumphantly.
It turns out it
Yeah.
was just John Doe Baker the whole time.
Well, I feel like there's a connective tissue because Calvin, you said you had that as well. Was that your pick? Did the Pentex beat you to it?
No, I did have another one actually.
Go on.
Those damn Stinger missiles in that nice BMW never get used
Oh,
because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
obviously they cut
now
out the
you're
whole.
stealing mine.
That was mine as
no,
well as a car. Oh no.
Because of course they had the you can see it in one of the behind the scenes things on the Blu-ray. They had the razor blade helicopter things from World Is Not Enough. There was going to be a whole thing, and you can see Chris Corbold in the behind the scenes thing going through the prototype and stuff. So they had that whole thing planned. But I think it was just budget, right? That they.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying the film necessarily needed that action sequence there. It's just one of those things. You set this up and it's so cool, and I love the Q scene anyway. I think it's the best Q scene of the whole series. I think there's such a kinetic energy to it, and just how the camera's moving, and Desmond's great. He's really energetic. So I don't want the BMW Z3 not in the film because I love that car and I love the scenes that it's in, but it is always just one of those things where, like, as a kid, I think it bothered me more because I just want to see this really cool car that I had the Corgi model of, and I could like open up the headlights and the missiles could come out. So why couldn't I see that in the film? But yeah.
I mean, my one's been blown out of the water. I have a backup, so I'll come back to it. But Dave, you haven't shared yours. Was the car yours?
The car is part of it. I will always feel like there's a missed opportunity in that Pierce never had his iconic car the way that the Aston Martin or the Lotus were the cars of Sean and Roger respectively. There's like 3 or 4 different BMWs, and then he has the Aston Martin that disappears, vanish in Die Another Day, the invisible car, which is lame. But it's really the third act in general of that movie. As much as I love GoldenEye, the part where I'm kind of lost or not bored, because bored makes it sound like I'm not interested in the movie. I'm still enjoying the movie, but it loses some of that momentum. We never quite match the first half of the film. Once we find out that Sean Bean is the villain, the movie loses some of its momentum. I think the best action sequence is the tank chase. It's hard to top that. A fight on a satellite dish is, you kind of need to have a fist fight at the end, right? Like, this is a villain that matches Bond physically. That's also a 00. There's a personal vendetta there, so they have to have a fist fight. And we might as well put it on a satellite dish because the movie's about satellites. Okay, great. But you go from we're gonna go to the car pulls up in the jungle, and it's just like there's something missing here. And obviously, what's missing is a lot of the action leading up to that final fisticuffs on the dish. It's just it never has that same momentum. It never has that same charge. It just feels like now we are obligated to end it. And I just wish that it had the same level of excitement that the rest of the movie had, that had the same production value, the same sort of sprawling nature that some of the best third acts of the Bond franchise have. If it's Goldfinger and Fort Knox, if it's the space battle in Moonraker, if it's You Only Live Twice in the Great John Barry set, or even Diamonds Are Forever, I kind of enjoy just from, again, a spectacle standpoint, right? It's silly, and you've got the buggy and all that stuff. But GoldenEye doesn't match the height of the great third acts of the Bond franchise. Spy Who Loved Me, again, Stromberg's boat. It's so cool to have him going through that set, that big, great Ken Adam set. You just don't get the same sort of thrill. It is Ken Adam, right, for Spy Who Loved Me. I know obviously he did
Mm-hmm.
the set for You Only Live Twice. I hope I didn't get that wrong.
Nope,
If I
you're
got
right.
something wrong, please kill me. Not literally, but because this is the inner sanctum of Bond nerddom, so I don't want to ever say anything incorrect. But those sets are beautiful. The visuals of the soldiers in various those situations, right? That classic ending to a Bond film. The soldiers come in. Bond is also going after the bad guy while the soldiers overtake the bad guy's lair. It's just not. It doesn't work the same. It's it's a sound stage. It's just a jungle set with a bunch of trees. It's sort of like this is a safe place for a Star Trek reference. Star Trek 3, the Genesis planet. The ending of
yeah.
that film feels very stage bound. It doesn't
Compared to
feel
what it was supposed to look like. Like the
Yeah,
idea
they were
of
gonna-
Genesis was huge.
they were going to go to Hawaii to film,
Yeah.
and they're like, we don't have money, just shoot it on the lot. And I think that's what must have happened here is like, we don't really have the money for a big sprawling set piece. Let's do it at Pinewood or something like that. I don't know what exactly happened with the downscaling of that ending, but it never clicks for me, and so it doesn't live up to what it could have been.
I think that's fair enough, but it did give us the sort of, no for me ending, and then Alec Trevelyan dying twice. I mean, how he survives that fall is still beyond me.
It's great. I was so excited as
It is a great
14-year-old to see
line.
that death.
It is a fantastic line, and it's one of the rare times where the joke is not a joke. There's always some sort of kiss off kind of like fun line from Bond at the end when he dispatches the villain. And this really had an emotional punch. That's great. Is that Bond is acknowledging that this is not just my job. Now this is personal, and I'm taking you out because of what you've done. It's a really great script. I just wish that the physical production, the set pieces matched the writing.
It's fair enough. I think I was going to mention the car. I think Eric Serra's score can sit there, and everyone would probably know that to discuss. But the other thing for me is the 006 backstory of the sort of Lien's Cossack stuff. It's fine. It's clearly like based in history, but I don't want to have to read. Like I don't have to look up history books just to sort of know someone's backstory. It's not a huge thing, but like whenever he mentions it in the sort of graveyard sequence, I'm just like, wait, who? What? What's your connection? What's the lineage? I don't. And so I just pretend it doesn't exist.
Just say he's a Nazi clone. The genetic experiment. Like, we're good. Okay, he's evil. All right, got it. No,
Got it.
Yeah, I see why they did it. I think that it's just because of the post Cold War milieu. You need to talk about Russia, and you talk about Britain and their connections and atrocities and all of these things that would only matter in that period.
Yeah. 14-year-old Cam, that was his favorite section of the movie.
I was running straight to Encyclopedia Britannica and looking up Lien's Cossacks like in the big old book. Like, what? Wait, what? Go on, Calvin.
In Cardiff Dictionary.
Do you prefer the alternate? Because for the GoldenEye Reloaded game, which is of course the Daniel Craig starring remake of the game, but they take on some of the films, they have to update Alec's backstory in that. So it's the 2008 financial crisis, which is the reason why he's doing all of this. Yeah. He's like, it's all about the bankers and their bonuses, and it's like, oh, okay.
I hate that game.
I haven't played it, and I hate it already.
It was such a stupid idea. Ugh.
Yeah, it's because it does sort of like half recreate, not even half actually. It's even less than that. The N64 game, but updates it for the Craig era, but in not a terribly exciting or interesting way.
Well, speaking of video games, I'm coming towards the end of our discussion on GoldenEye, but I can't let it go without having a quick chat about GoldenEye N64, because I think for at least a couple of us in this discussion, it was very impactful.
Do you know how to use one of these?
GoldenEye. Load a rumble pack and see how it feels when 007 meets N64.
So just we'll go around again, have a little chat about it. What impact do you think the video game had on the film itself and on sort of the bigger Bond franchise as a whole? Like what impact did that game have? Let's go with Pentex first.
Well, this is where I have to make my terrible confession as a Bond fan, which is that not only did I not grow up on the game, I still haven't played it.
Oh my
What?
god.
I say this and the room goes silent. I can tell. I'll show myself out now. Yeah, no, we had a classic PlayStation growing up, and the only James Bond video game I had was 007 Racing.
Oh no.
Oh no, you poor thing.
I
Poor
know,
thing.
Wow.
This is my Bond. This is my
That's a
Bond villain
terrible
origin
game.
story.
Jesus.
Is that the only Bond game I got to play was 007 Racing? But yeah, so I've never actually played the game, but obviously, I'm so aware of its significance and its legacy for the genre. And I think when you're thinking about GoldenEye, as we've talked about before, how the game and the film are they do kind of exist outside of Bond, but I think that has more to do with the game than the film. When you think about the really game-changing Bond films, like Goldfinger, Spy Who Loved Me, in terms of Bond films that change not just Bond but the wider cinematic landscape, I'm not sure if GoldenEye did that. GoldenEye is super influential for the Bond series. I'm not sure you see signs of GoldenEye film in other films of the era that came after it in the way you see that with like Goldfinger, but you do see that with the game, and that game spawned a whole genre that is still being imitated. So I think that's my take, at least, on the kind of the shared identity of the game and the film, but in terms of how they impacted and changed their respective medias effectively.
I agree with you on the game. I think in terms of the film, I suspect when we get Bond 26 or 28, depending on your definition of Bond films, I think a lot of that will be looking at GoldenEye. I suspect that will be a good blueprint for them moving forward. And I think people will be going, oh, they've taken lessons from GoldenEye. Because I hope they go more the GoldenEye route than the Casino Royale route in terms of the tone. That's a whole other discussion. And I can't prognosticate the future, but I think I think GoldenEye had more of an impact on Bond films, personally speaking. But the game itself, definitely, it is the main evolution of the first-person shooter post Doom and Wolfenstein and things like that. I was playing, Doom and Wolfenstein on my MS-DOS computer in the early '90s, and then GoldenEye came around, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is something else." Multiplayer, all kinds of stuff. They are still trying to emulate GoldenEye in how they make multiplayer games now, and they still struggle to get that magic back. Even the remake reboot version they put out, but also the one where they just put it back out on Xbox and Nintendo recently, like, it is well enough and it plays well enough, but the magic's not there anymore. And it's interesting. Maybe that's just nostalgia. Who knows? Dave, what's your take on the game and its impact?
Well, yeah, you could never replicate the first time you play a game. Like, I remember the first time I played Halo, and I had no idea about Halo, its development, what it was going to be, what it became, the fact that it was a real-time strategy game that became a first-person shooter. I didn't know that there was going to be a twist where there were zombies. And so when it happened, I'm like, whoa, this is a totally different game than I thought it was going to be. This is alien, and this is very weird. GoldenEye will always be special to me because it was not my first person shooter either. I had played Wolfenstein, I played Doom just like you, but it was the first time on console that you had a game that felt fully realized as a first person shooter, that had this IP that's iconic. You've finally replicated the experience of being James Bond in a video game. I'm sure everyone on here has at least seen some of the previous attempts at James Bond video games in the Dalton era or even before that, and they're pretty bad. There's not a way to be James Bond in a video game in the NES era or the arcade era. But when you say, okay, he just goes around shooting people. You're like, yeah, I get it. Okay, I understand. This makes sense. It is the reason why certain people are fans of a certain generation. If you look at every era of Bond, there's a jumping off point. There's a reason why you get into it. I think, with the Connery era, it was Dr. No being a massive success and then Goldfinger being even bigger. The books were a huge deal. You think about how much of a pop culture phenomenon the books were because of JFK saying they were his favorite books and him being president of the United States, and it fitting the aesthetic of that era in the 60s so perfectly. So you could have jumped on with one of the first three films, you could have jumped on with the books. Then in the 70s, really, you have seen Bond go from the heights to kind of it being a little pitiful. And now these are B movies. They didn't used to be B movies in the 60s, but they became B movies because of the sort of lesser production value, lesser artistry of things like Live and Let Die or Golden Gun, or even before that, Diamonds Are Forever, which I know there are people who love that movie. I think it's one of the worst in the entire franchise because of just how bored Connery is, how kind of lackluster the direction is, and the need for camp humor in it. It wasn't until Spy Who Loved Me was again another huge pop culture phenomenon that you had an entry point for Bond that was contemporary. And it was that movie and then Moonraker right on top of it. These two movies that one topped the other in terms of spectacle, in terms of ambition, in terms of Moore's performance. He finally figured out who he was supposed to be as James Bond. And then the Dalton movies obviously did what they tried to do and were unsuccessful in most ways in terms of commercial viability. When you get to Brosnan, GoldenEye is a big hit, but it is that game that is the entry point. That is the thing that really skyrocketed Bond from this is an old person's franchise. This is a thing from the 60s that we've dusted off and we're kind of trying to revitalize it to kids are playing this video game. Teenagers are playing this video game. It's now succeeded in a different medium, and a medium that has a massive runway of future potential to it. We all know where the movies are in terms of their esteem in popular culture. It's waning, it's ossifying, it's not growing, it's considered a 20th century art form in a lot of ways. Video games aren't. Video games are literature for people. Video games are television shows for people. It is the thing that they have the most fond memories of. At least my generation and younger love video games, and they are what drives culture. The fact that GoldenEye 64 is one of the most beloved and most important video games of all time means that James Bond will never be irrelevant, at least not for another few generations, because there will always be this game that you can pick up and you can play and you can enjoy in the way that people in the 70s could look at the Connery movies and enjoy them, or read the books and enjoy them, even though they were older, or, the pleasures of watching the Brosnan movies for some people after they got into the Craig movies. The video game is an entry point and a powerful one for young people. There's a reason why Star Trek, as much as I love Star Trek and a lot of people on this panel love Star Trek, hasn't connected with young audiences as much as it could. It's because there's never been a great Star Trek video game. There's never been a great Star Trek animated series. I know people like Prodigy and Lower Decks, but those aren't moving the needle for kids. A video game would move the needle for kids. And GoldenEye made an entire generation of James Bond fans. And for that, I will always be grateful for that game.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think it's interesting that we've got a new film in development and a new game being developed. And I wonder if they might just try and coincide some things to try and get some energy going.
Game looks fun. I love the idea of an original story, an original Bond, kind of a more rough and tumble Bond. I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Cam, what about you? What's your take on GoldenEye 64?
I mean, that is the story of my late teens. It was, it came out right near the end of my high school, and I was actually gonna tap out on video games, because I don't know why. I just had kind of lost interest. I was getting to more movies and going to concerts and things like that. But my friend had a 64 and got GoldenEye, invited me over, and I was like, I have to play this game. And there was a deal. It was so weird. There's a store called Zellers here. It's kind of like Target. Zellers doesn't really exist anymore, but back in the day, it was kind of like a smaller version of Target here. And they had a deal where it was like Senior Citizen Day, where they would give discounts.
So you went, obviously.
I convinced an old man to buy me a Nintendo 64. Basically, I had the money, but I had to go find an elderly man in the mall, bring him to Zellers, and get him to buy the system and the GoldenEye cartridge to save me like, I don't know, 15% or something like that off the ticket price.
Did you pay him for doing it?
Yeah. I gave him the money. Like, it wasn't like he was paying out of his pocket.
Did you pay him for taking your money and going in and collecting it? No, he just did it out of the kindness of his heart.
That was his good deed for the day, I suppose, helping a struggling youth get his video game system. But that game system and that game became like just an obsession. It was, as soon as we graduated high school, it was order pizza, grab McDonald's, whatever, and play GoldenEye for like 10 hours straight. And we would just do that in my friend's basement for a couple of years before we switched to like Perfect Dark and a couple other games. But like, I would go home and I was obsessed with finishing GoldenEye. I passed it on every single difficulty level just to unlock that 007 mode. And
He's
then that
flexing
opened
now. He's flexing.
That's right. That opened up then new avenues to playing different types of multiplayer modes. And so it was just like an absolute obsession that has never been replicated for me since, ever. And I do enjoy that, like, if I hear a friend like reference Dr. Doak, we immediately start laughing because we know what that means. Things like that. It really did add to the details of Bond fandom in a way that I know there's other games that were very popular. I played Nightfire on the PC, but they didn't contribute to the kind of the conversation of Bond the way that GoldenEye did, and like the in-jokes.
I'd be remiss if I didn't give Calvin his time, because he's played many a video game on his wonderful YouTube channel. So I think he might have something to say about GoldenEye 64.
Oh, yes, love it. I mean, all of the memories of childhood and, going around to, my friend Lee's, because he had, out of all of us, he was the one with an older brother who was a teenager who had money at that time in order to buy multiple controllers and different games and stuff. So it was his house that we all would pile up into, and then that'd be like 5 or 6 of us most times, and then we take it in turns, and it's so the loser has to swap with somebody else and that kind of thing. I remember being devastated when everyone else was ready to move on and start playing Perfect Dark and Jet Force Gemini as the N64 multiplayer games of choice, and I was still, no, but what about GoldenEye? So yeah, all of the just fond childhood memories and all of that. It's probably not my favorite Bond game anymore. Like, I do, if I'm going back to one, I probably play Nightfire, Agent Under Fire, Everything or Nothing more. But, I mean, obviously GoldenEye is, as I mentioned earlier on, a brand unto itself. There's a reason why they released GoldenEye Rogue Agent, GoldenEye Reloaded, every single time a Bond game comes out. And even when First Light comes out, it'll have been 30 years probably since N64 GoldenEye. It will be compared to that. But, not necessarily a bad thing. I think most... for a movie tie-in game, I know it came out a couple of years after the film was released, but still tying into a movie franchise, like most, studios now would be like rubbing their hands with glee to have such a big hit. I did just look it up then because I was like, was it the second or third highest selling game on the N64? It was the third highest selling, so just below Mario 64 and Mario Kart, and then it's GoldenEye, above like the Pokemon Stadium games, above Zelda games, above all of these like, beloved Nintendo franchises. And I mean, I can't think of a single other sort of a game that started as a movie tie-in having that amount of just cultural and critical relevancy. It's quite a lightning in a bottle kind of situation, really. And it's a game where they will move heaven and earth to fix the licensing, which is all over the place, with Rare, the developer, being owned by Microsoft, but it's published as a Nintendo game. You've got all the actor likenesses and whatnot, so an absolute licensing nightmare to get it re-released on a modern console. But they will move heaven and earth to make that finally happen, like you said, Scott, when it got released on Xbox and Nintendo, because it's that valuable, even now, to have GoldenEye on your Nintendo Switch. They made quite a thing of it when it was finally being put on their virtual console. So the fact that it still has that cultural cachet is really valuable, I think, for the wider James Bond franchise in an awful lot of ways. I think Dave's bang on the money, where I think it's going to be another couple of generations at least before that goes away. And I think the film GoldenEye and the James Bond series has only benefited off of that, and I'm really looking forward to First Light coming out. So hopefully we can try to get Bond back into that space where he hasn't been for 13 years at this point. Mm-hmm. Do some quick maths.
I mean, there's loads of things to bring together on that. I mean, it's interesting to think about this. There's still a thriving speed running community running GoldenEye. There's like championships for the speed runs of GoldenEye. People still play it at that level. It's still beloved for that. And I can't resist talking about Star Trek, but it's an interesting thing to talk about what this impact of this game has had, and it's brought a whole new generation of fans in, including myself. I can chart the course of my Bond fandom back to this game very easily. And Star Trek, me and Cam go to conventions. We met it at a convention. You go to those conventions now, and they're filled with people our age and older. We're the kids of the convention. There are young Bond fans because of this game. And Star Trek has not had its moment like this game. And it hasn't had that moment really since the early 90s, from sort of TNG, the 90s boom of Star Trek. And I'm glad GoldenEye happened for Bond. It does need another one, I think, in the next 10 to 20 years to make sure it's relevant for another few generations. But I'm glad it happened, because I know a lot of people can chart their course back to this game.
There'll never be a good Star Trek game ever, so just let it go.
It's hard. It's very hard to. But the Telltale
game.
the Telltale style game that came out a couple of years ago was okay. Resurgence, I think it was called. That was okay. But anyway, this isn't. It was fine. Okay, now we've got one big question left, but because we're talking about GoldenEye, I have to throw a quick curveball question at everyone, although they have prepared for this. The problem is, Pentex, you've not played the game. So I'm just going to make you James Bond in this question. You're automatically defined. You're James Bond. You get to be Pierce Brosnan in this. The rest of us, no problem there. But the rest of us, we're playing a multiplayer game, just the four of us. What character are you selecting?
Xenia.
What's your go-to? Xenia. Oh, okay. Calvin was always Xenia. Calvin's got Xenia. Dave, what are you going for?
Probably Oddjob.
Oh,
Oddjob was banned in my house. No,
wow. Okay.
That was outlawed among my friends and I. We were like, nope, no Oddjobs.
You always miss the headshot because he's just too short.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cheeky. Cam, what about you? What's your pick?
Siberian Special Forces. That was the one I always went with. Every single time.
I actually always went for Boris.
Oh, okay.
Because
you want to be invincible?
Yes.
Invincible. Yeah, there you go. We didn't talk about Ellen Cumming, by the way. We went an entire 2 hours talking about this movie, and Ellen Cumming is incredibly funny. Arguably more famous now than he was then. But one of the more memorable side characters in the whole franchise.
I always remember his behind-the-scenes interview where he says, "I'm the first Bond boy." I always love that little line he added in. But a great performance, I have to agree. But as you say, it's been coming up to the 2 hour mark. I want to take everyone home with one final question, which is, we're celebrating 30 years of GoldenEye. What is the legacy of GoldenEye? What has it done for the franchise? And what is its impact? So I'll start from my right. So we'll go to Pentex first. What is the legacy of GoldenEye?
Where to start? Well, yeah, I think I would just come back to that point of, like, Bond's always been about reinvention, but this was probably the highest stakes and the biggest reinvention that the series needed. It had had other new actors before, but there had always been a level of continuity and consistency. A lot of the people behind the scenes returning, but this was, as we've talked about, it was new people across the board. It had been 6 years, all sorts of legal wranglings. There's a big question of whether Bond would ever come back. And then separately, the world had changed massively, with the end of the Cold War and that whole dynamic. And the idea, oh, well, this is already a character who's perceived by some as being quite dated, but who's also very much born out of the Cold War. Now that world doesn't even exist. And then all the people who made them are all gone. So does this character need to come back, or can the character come back? And I think it answered that so definitively. And I see a lot of parallels between that interregnum and the one we're in now. And you mentioned it earlier, Scott. I do really hope that this is the template that they look to when rebooting the next Bond. I think I love Casino Royale. I love what they did, but that approach of rebooting a character by stripping it back to basics and then reintroducing everything, it's been done so many times. And what GoldenEye does is reboot a character, but by embracing all of the tropes. That scene in the casino is like a 5-6 minute scene that has every single Bond trope in the first 20 minutes of the movie. He orders the martini shake not stirred. He says James Bond. He's in a tuxedo who pulls up in an Aston Martin DB5. It's just like, in case you missed it, this is a James Bond movie. And it does the Q scene. It does the Moneypenny scene. It's not afraid of being a Bond film, and it modernizes all those elements as we've talked about it. But it still remains faithful to the core of the series. And I think you can do that if you've got an already established Bond, because the audience knows who Bond is. So let's have fun with that. And I think it's success and just being able to come out of such a troubled period for the studio and for Eon and for the character and the idea of Bond is amazing. And it continues 30 years later to have that impact, and people still point to it as one of the best ones. And it's even more interesting looking at it now because it's kind of the midpoint of the Bond series, and there's a very clear sense of kind of before and after, I think, with it. And it was so successful that it is responsible for the second half of the 60 odd years that we've had of James Bond.
Agreed. Dave, what about you? What's GoldenEye's legacy?
I mean, I think Pentex really described it accurately. There would not be a James Bond today without GoldenEye going as well as it could have and did. They had a massive challenge, a challenge that I think will only be eclipsed by what is required of David Heyman and Amy Pascal with the next iteration of Bond, the MGM era of Bond, the Amazon MGM era of Bond. They certainly had a challenge with Daniel Craig and reinventing Bond for a post 9/11 world, a post Cold War world in between the fall of the wall and 9/11 looks very different than that world in 2000, September 12th, 2001, or 2002 when Die Another Day came out. So there have been moments, inflection points of the franchise where world events require you to reimagine James Bond, but this was the first time where it was really, really necessary. Replacing an actor is one thing, reinventing the notion of the character, figuring out what its purpose is in the real world is another. And this was a home run. It's not the best Bond movie. It's not a perfect Bond movie, but it is the best Pierce Brosnan movie. It is the perfect Pierce Brosnan movie. And the stars aligned. The right director, the right cast, the right... We didn't even talk about Tina Turner. The right theme song.
Yeah.
That is... The Tina Turner should have done at least 3 Bond themes. She should have been the Shirley Bassey of the Brosnan era. And the fact that she never came back to do another one is a crime. And Adele has to do another one. Like, let's have somebody be our Shirley Bassey for this era. I think it's important. Everything worked with that movie, even the score. As weird as it is, it's of the era. It adds to the kind of alien, weird, modern, sexy, kind of sleazy vibe of that movie. It's phenomenal. And I agree with Scott that if you're gonna reboot James Bond, when they're doing it right now, the one to watch is GoldenEye, because it's the one that synthesizes all the things that matter about James Bond. It doesn't say, let's strip all this stuff away and let's slowly but surely give him those things across 4 movies or 5 movies. Let's just have James Bond be James Bond in a film, and allow that the pleasure of seeing James Bond be the thing that brings you to the theater.
The discussion's getting harder for the next person along. Calvin, how do you top that? How do you top Dave and Pentex there? What's your take on the GoldenEye legacy?
That was both so eloquent. I don't know if I can, but I mean, I think when I initially thought about answering the question, it was sort of, my head did immediately go to, oh, it is emphatic proof of the resurrection, of the reinvention of this series. And so I know it comes up like every few years, like, always James Bond relevant in this day and age. And it's kind of like, if he can do it in GoldenEye, then he can do it pretty much any time otherwise, I would have thought. But I think that the film is it has a cultural legacy, and I think it is one of those milestone Bond films in the same way that Spy Who Loved Me and Goldfinger are. When they re-released the Bond films in cinemas here in the UK a few years ago for the 60th anniversary, I think it was at MI6 HQ, they were keeping track of the box office takings of each of the films as they were coming out week on week. GoldenEye was number 1, and that was sort of like, and I remember them commenting that this is quite unusual, really, because Goldfinger was always traditionally the one. I think Goldfinger was number 2 on the list. That was always the one that on re-releases, that gets bums on seats in a way that the likes of, Man with the Golden Gun doesn't. But GoldenEye had taken that spot now, which I do think speaks to its legacy, and it's still relevant for an awful lot of people. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's a lovely thing to celebrate.
Cam?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was, I remember a couple years ago thinking that like maybe the kind of the legacy of GoldenEye is diminished now with Casino Royale being so hugely successful. The idea of kind of launching the newer era, that maybe people would look at Casino Royale as, well, that's how you restart Bond. And maybe GoldenEye would have lost a step there. But I really think, like, when you look back, that's kind of the importance of GoldenEye. There's so many like firsts in the Bond franchise. There's the movie that figures out, the opening credits song, Goldfinger. There's the one that, nails down all the various elements that kind of add up to what we love now. And I think that they had never really successfully launched a Bond or figured out how to do it until GoldenEye. I love Live and Let Die. I love Honor Majesties, but like they didn't have the confidence and they didn't have the success hit that GoldenEye did at launching their Bond. And I think when you look at a Casino Royale or going forward with Amazon, they are looking at what are the pieces that make a successful relaunch of Bond, and that's GoldenEye. And so that's kind of, I think, its place. I think there's a reason it lands in these top 5s. I think it is the most beloved of a generation, and the video game obviously ties into that. But also, every actor has their Bond. When you ask people, Sean Connery, they're probably going to say Goldfinger. Roger Moore, they're going to say The Spy Who Loved Me. And I think with Pierce Brosnan, what sums up his era will be GoldenEye.
Just going around from the idea of the Bond films after this owe a debt to GoldenEye, I think that is very true. I don't think that could be overstated. There almost wasn't a GoldenEye. The fact that GoldenEye happened is almost a miracle in itself, and the fact that GoldenEye worked is a miracle in itself. Every single film, the fact that we're here, the fact that Amazon is making a new film, really owes a debt to everyone who put together GoldenEye. And I think for me, that's its legacy.
And the
I
fact
agree.
that people say, like, get Martin Campbell to come back. Like, there was a lot of people wanting him. The fact that they recognize him as a crucial element in confidently starting a Bond, that's, obviously they went back to him for Casino.
Mm-hmm. Who knows what the future will bring for Bond? Hopefully it's bright. Hopefully it's golden. But I'm glad we've had these 30 years of GoldenEye. Long may she reign. And gentlemen, thank you all for taking the time to celebrate GoldenEye with us. I'm going to go around the room one last time. I want to hear where people can find you online, hear more from you all. Pentex, why don't you take it away?
Best places to find my YouTube channel, Pentex Productions. There's lots of way too detailed retrospectives about various James Bond movies, but some other things as well about Lord of the Rings and some other films as well. So you'll enjoy yourself there, hopefully.
If you want to hear some good impressions from Cam, myself, and Calvin as well on Pentex's videos, you can check us all out there. Although I'm still hurt that you didn't use our funny voices for the ones we submitted, the wacky ones.
Yeah, for the I think you three turn up in the Man with the Golden Gun one. That you and Cam being the producers of Spectre was very entertaining. But that video got weird enough as it was. So.
Maybe for the Christmas bonus episode or something, you can put those out. But then again, people listen to our weird voices every week. So, hey ho. But yeah, Pentex. And I recommend the channel. There'll be links in the show notes below. Go check out Pentex Productions. Great channel. And the Rock video. Go check that one out as well. That's a great video on The Rock. One of my favorite Sean Connery films there.
Thank you.
Dave, well, you're back for the second time. It's been a pleasure having you here. Where can people find you online?
Well, if you must, I am at Dave_Schilling on X. I am at DW Schilling on Instagram and Threads. But most importantly, I have a very exciting book coming out in September, the end of September, about the 15-year anniversary of Blumhouse. I interviewed pretty much everybody you would expect to talk to about Blumhouse movies. I talked to Jordan Peele about Get Out. I talked to obviously Jason Blum, who's the guy, the filmmakers from Megan, from Sinister, from The Purge, all the big classic Blumhouse movies. So if you're a horror aficionado, this is kind of your ultimate look at, I think, maybe the most important production company for horror of the 21st century, at least so far. I mean, we've got some years to go, but Blumhouse movies have changed cinema, and I got an inside look into it and wrote a book about it. So check it out.
Yeah, I'm sold.
What's the book?
Oh, the book. I'm sorry,
yeah.
The book. Sorry, yeah, I forget that that's important. I'm just starting to do press now, and I'm like, I should remember the name of the book. It's Horror's New Wave, 15 Years of Blumhouse. And it's from Simon Element, which is a division of Simon & Schuster. And it's, I believe, the official date is the 29th of September. But you can pre-order it now on Amazon or any other place where you can pre-order books. So please do.
Oh, let alone the listeners at home. You just sold a few copies in this chat, because I'll be picking up a copy of that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. I see no more money for it, but that's fine.
Well, we'll put a link in the show notes below to that, so you can find the listing on Amazon. I'll make sure to post about it on our socials as well, so you can find it on there. But Dave, thank you for that. And then last but not least, Calvin, sir, you're back for the millionth time. You say it's third. I think it's more personally, but welcome back. Where can people find you and your wonderful YouTube channel?
Thank you. I am just Calvin Dyson on most, with that particular inflection, apparently. I don't know what was going on there.
Calvin Dyson.
Yeah, my voice is finally breaking. Yes, Calvin Dyson mainly on YouTube, but if you do want to follow me on X or Instagram, Facebook, then that's all good too.
I strongly recommend it. We haven't. Well, I mean, I guess we have featured on there. You've used a bit of our Denise Richards interview before, I think, on there.
Yes, and your oh my God, the executive
Jeff Kleeman.
Jeff Kleeman. Yes. God, his name escaped me then. Yeah. No, I shamelessly come to SpyHards every time I sort of need some bit of that interview they did was so damn good. I just need to include that instead of.
Hey. Yeah. We have big egos. If someone asks to use our stuff, then yeah, you can absolutely use it, because we just want to plaster our name everywhere. So that's it. But no, you've been here since the beginning, Calvin, and we thank you. And we're big fans. So go check out Calvin's channel if you haven't already. It's been an absolute pleasure, gents. Thank you all for your time. Hope you've all enjoyed listening at home, and we'll see you next time, folks.